Okay, good morning, everyone. We're calling the special meeting of the Rossstown Council Annual Strategic Workshop on Thursday, February 25th to order. Linda, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Breckus.
Uh-oh.
Here.
Oh, good.
Councilmember Kircher. Oh, is he here? I actually don't see him on the list. I thought everyone was here.
Would you like me to call him or text him?
Sure.
Okay.
I think you should keep going, Linda.
Okay. Here he is.
Oh, good.
He's just arriving.
Okay.
Councilmember Cool
Here.
and Councilmember Robbins.
Here.
Mayor McMillan.
Here. And has the agenda been posted?
Yes, it has.
All right, now is the open time for public expression. It's limited to 3 minutes per speaker on items not on our agenda. Linda, is there any member of the public who wishes to speak?
I do not see anyone with raised hands, so the answer is no.
All right. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Joe to lead our strategic workshop. Joe.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. The strategic workshop, and it's an opportunity for the council and staff to have an early update and discussion about services and facilities the town is providing, and to begin our discussions on the upcoming fiscal year 2021-22 budget and capital improvement plan. As part of that process, we want to hear the council's thoughts on our town's goals, priorities, and projects in the town that will help guide staff as we move forward in serving the community. Your council package includes 2 staff reports that we will discuss. The first one is the 5-year fiscal forecast report, which shows the town's capacity to provide our current level of services into the future and determine if we should expect financial shortfalls or surpluses into the future. The analysis relates to our town operating fund, which funds all the town's departments' operating services and a portion of our capital facilities. After that discussion, we will discuss the draft 5-year capital improvement plan, CIP for short, which provides the longer-term vision of infrastructure and facilities improvements in the community to service the next 5 years and the financial resources available to pay for them. Council will then review the town goals that we developed over the last several years. Do council members agree with the 6 goals, or are there any proposed refinements? It is extremely helpful for staff in the community to have an understanding of where the council collectively want the town and community to be in the future, so we can take the necessary steps each year to meet the long-term vision and goals. Staff has started the work on the upcoming fiscal year 21-22 budget. We've developed an initial list of one-time non-capital related studies and projects to consider for the new budget. We want to hear from councils, your thoughts on the potential projects in the coming year and relate to the 5-year CIP, and if there are any additional thoughts you have. After the discussions on the financial outlook, CIP, and town services, some new priorities may emerge based on the discussion. Are there any questions about today's workshop before we begin the financial forecast discussion?
I just have a question. Should we take public comment after each one of these items, or just ask for public comment?
That's council, it's your mayor prerogative, but yes, we could do that at the end of each presentation.
Okay, let's do that. And I noticed Ben is not on the call. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't see this as a legal framework at all.
Okay, great.
Um,
Thank you.
Now I do want to, any other questions before we start the 5-year financial forecast more on process? And we'll also look to, depending on the timing, look to take a break at some point in the midst when we need one. It is very different being not in person for the strategic workshop. This is a little more informal than our council meetings intent-wise. I do want council members to ask questions as we go into the items instead of waiting till the end of the presentation. If you have questions as we go, please ask them. Given the shared screen, obviously in person, I could see when you're trying to ask questions. I'm going to have Linda looking out for hands, but if she can't see them, just speak up and ask questions. I'll stop a couple times during the presentation to see if there's any questions, but if you have them, just feel free. Want to keep this a little more informal than a normal council meeting, given this is a workshop. And with that, the purpose of the 5-year forecast is to assist the council management in understanding our ability as a town to fund the current levels of service in the future. Is it sustainable? And in a lot of jurisdictions across California, it is not sustainable. So we'll answer for Ross, does it in the current environment and things, does it look sustainable to fund our current level of services? And then it also then tells us what is our ability to fund alternative programs and services in the short term and long term. If there are available monies, we could do additional things. If we have shortfalls, we really have to reduce what we're doing or find new revenue sources. The forecast projects the revenues and expenses in fiscal year 2021 through 2026 for the town's operating fund. The operating fund funds all the money, the lion's share, the discretionary money in the town's budget. It funds all of our town departments and a small portion of our capital facility cost. The estimates are based on the revenues and expenses based on our current town policies and state statutes. There are times, particularly in the past, state changes laws, which will change how much our revenues are mandates for programs. So this is based on the current environment. Obviously, that could change with different changes of legislation. We do have, most of our capital facilities are funded out of our capital funds, our facilities fund, our road fund, our drainage impact fee, and gas tax. We do make a transfer of money, capital, each year from the operating fund, and we've been growing that over the years. So we started in fiscal year 2017, we had $375,000. The current budget includes $550,000 transfer from facility fund. And this 5-year forecast, we've kept in a $550,000 transfer each year to help pay for our facility costs. Also in here, we have, this has been a practice, and we'll talk more about pensions in this when we get there, but includes $200,000 a year we've been paying for either direct pension buy down from CalPERS or putting into our PAR Section 115 trust for pension costs. So we've been going beyond the requirements by $200,000 a year, at least. And we'll talk more about that one. And to get to the summary, and obviously your packet has the full details behind all the numbers. The summary is the question, are we sustainable? The answer is yes, over the 5-year period. What you see is, didn't need to click. I was trying to use my pointer. Can you guys see my pointer or no? Okay. This fiscal year, we start with a budget that was slightly more than break even, would have like a 17,000. We're projecting we'll end up this year around 300,000. It's still early to see. In the future years, we show a slight surplus or break even each year. And it shows as a slight surplus, gradually increasing generally over time. I call it break even and projections. Anything less than 1% of expenses is really break even. We're in the margin. That being said, this is a very good result. And if you recall in prior years, our expenses were actually increasing greater than our revenues. We'd come off a slight surplus. So overall, this is a positive indication. It's not saying we're going to have a lot of additional money for beyond the $550,000 transfers and 200,000 pension transfers that we do, but it is saying we could obviously sustain those and as well as our current level of services. Are there any questions from council related? Sorry, there's silence going on.
How did we get to 306,000 surplus this year? That seems quite remarkable.
Part of it, the revenues, though some are down, some are up. For example, we got a $50,000 coronavirus payment from the government for costs incurred last fiscal year. There's some departments, we've got some one-time payments on the revenue. The big part is the expenses are coming in under budget to some level. And some of it's due to reductions in some areas. What we'll be talking about later. We are seeing less building and recreation activity, which has affected the revenue definitely, but also as a effect, obviously we've been reducing the expenses in those departments.
Okay, thanks.
I thought I saw a hand.
I had a hand up, but I'm withdrawing my question.
Okay, if you have it, just ask. And as I said, we'll be going specifically into revenues next and then expenses if it's on one of those or no.
So
Julie?
I have a question, Joe. This you're assuming that we're going to be able to make a $550,000 contribution to the facilities fund up until the time we begin construction on the new facilities?
Yes, but I'm going to talk about, I'm looking to do a bigger fund transfer this year that I'm going to bring up during this presentation because we have now, and part of this was planned, we have more money in our operating fund balance than we beyond safety. And I'm going to propose we transfer, and I'll get into that a little bit,
Okay.
A larger transfer this fiscal year and still keeping our operating fund balance at a sustainable, safe level.
Okay.
Joe,
I'll wait. Go ahead, Beach.
Joe, I do have a question. The 200,000 that we pay down on our pensions, on our pension fund stuff, does that come out of the 550?
No, separate. So there's two pools. There's one pool that's for capital facilities and the pension's a separate 200,000. So in fact, we're doing $750,000 of transfers beyond our normal obligations. Other council questions? And obviously you could catch, because we're going to go through just to get a sequence, the revenues, expenses, then kind of summarize it all together. And so there are going to be several more times we'll be, as we go through. So tied to the revenues, what we've seen is there's a 2% increase in total revenues and during what we're saying for next fiscal year's our projection, which isn't a large increase. but it returns the revenues back to $8.5 million in our operating fund, which is back to where we were 3 years ago in fiscal year 19. So you can see the pandemic recession and impacts have definitely had effects. Some minor ones in taxes, like property transfers tax and sales tax. The much bigger hits have been to our recreation and building revenues. And at the same time, we've been having a substantial decrease in interest rates over the last couple of years. And that's reduced. Investment income was up to $240,000 a year. Now it's down to, it's going to like $70,000 this year because of interest rate reductions. So these three items, recreation, building, and interest rates, we've seen a decline of combined $900,000 of revenue since 2019. So could definitely see how things are changing. Now, what that leads us, though, when we have once the pandemic, coronavirus, and we get back to normal, more normalized levels of activities, we're going to see a growth where we've gone through this decline and now starting a slight increase in fiscal year 23, projecting a 5% growth in overall revenues, which is really led by the recovery of these kind of revenues that have been dipping down. Then the forecast in the years that follow, 24 through 26, is averages about 3.2% annual increase in the years that follow. On specific revenues,
Can I just ask a question on the revenue projection? Where is the 3.2% coming from?
well, this is the combination of everything. So as I'll go, like property taxes are actually slightly above 3.2%.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a detailed tables, if you wanted me to go through the tables in there, we have the percent change of every single of our revenue items. And you can see some are above 3.2 and many are below 3.2. Of the big ones, property tax is by far the biggest revenue. So it's going to drive the lion's share. The growth rate's expected to be 3% to 4.2% a year, changing year to year, but it's in that range. And property taxes have become more and more important. They're now 70, counting the public safety tax measure, which is about 10% of it. It's now 71% of the town's revenues coming from property tax sources. That it was 64% in fiscal year 19. So you can see property taxes have been gaining importance. There's other revenues like the business license tax, overall franchises, property transfer tax, and sales taxes that are not expected to meet inflation. They're growing at a slower rate. Obviously, we've seen a huge, so you have these other revenues. Now, my revenues like rents, we have cell tower leases and post office. Those have been growing at generally the rate of inflation and been a good source. And those, we get over $200,000 a year from those sources, $250,000 range. Investment income, as I said, used to be $240,000. Now it's going down to $60,000 probably next year. Now I expect them when interest rates start increasing slowly over time, that will start going up some. So it's really a combination of all these revenues to get to that overall average. But you're looking at, these are kind of categories of things that are moving higher and lower. And then you have something like investment income that bounces substantially more volatile as a percent just because of interest rates. Does that answer your?
Yeah, thank you.
question?
Bottom line is we're really fortunate to be so dependent on our property tax revenue.
Yeah. Obviously, as long as property tax, you look at the Great Recession. And the other thing about property taxes, it's slow to go down and it's slow to go up. In effect, there's like a 2-year lag by the time you have a change in market, till it changes assessed value, till it gets reflected into your property taxes. So you did see, though, when the real estate market dropped, the 30%, or, well, it was different throughout the state, depending where you were, 20 to 60%, it crashed people's property taxes. But it took a time, and you have a little time. The difference is sales taxes, when a recession hits, you'll lose 10 to 25% of your revenue the next quarter. Now they'll boom then when they recover, you'll see a huge surplus immediately, where property taxes are much slower and overall steadier. There are some, now that being said, most jurisdictions, sales taxes could be, in some jurisdictions, they're the largest source of revenue, and others second largest. Obviously here, it's a non-revenue almost, it's 65,000. We are at the bottom of the over 430 cities in the state. We're in like the bottom 10 or 15 of per capita, even given our small size, per capita sales tax, just because we have so little retail things that generate sales tax. So, yeah. And obviously, a lot of jurisdictions, if you have hotels, motels, that is a huge revenue. And jurisdictions I've been, that is a giant revenue for jurisdictions that have it. Obviously, we don't have such a thing here. Oh, any other questions on revenues before we move to expenses? Okay. Expenses. As I said, we're in a decline in expenses, but then coming off of this year through 2026, the average annual is 4%, going from 8 million this year to 9.8 million projected in 2026. As we've talked about this year, we're expecting a 2% decrease in total expenses, really tied mostly to recreation and building department expense reductions with the pandemic. That being said, when we come off of that, as we go in the recovery, we're expecting in the next 2 years, 22 and 23, then the expenses to bounce back up with a 5% overall increase as we get a more normalized level of activity in those departments. And then following that, in the 24 to 26, we're at an average annual range of 3.3% to 3.3%. If you recall, that's the same range as the revenue growth, which is really a good outcome to really have them in lining up. That's better than most jurisdictions. And going into the expense categories, we are assuming a 3 to 4% increase in total wages annually. The biggest item, bigger than inflation, is pension costs. And this one is the average annual increase is about 7% a year. Now, that is a big percentage, obviously compounded. If you recall, years ago, like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, it was over 10% average annual. So it's our strategies we've been developing to reduce it by making additional payments that we've got it now down to the 7%. Obviously, we're still very vigilant. I talk to our CalPERS actuarial a number of times every year, just to keep on our strategy and where we should be moving and where it's going. Since 5th and 26, and the staff report says a number of measures we've taken, like in 2016 through 2018, we paid down $2 million of additional liability. That saved us over $4 million in long-term cost. And in fact, our projections, even from like 3 years ago, were $120,000 to $150,000 higher per year than the years that we're at now because of our additional work and pay downs. We changed our amortization schedule from 30 years to 20 years. What that did is it increased our short-term costs, but it's greatly lowering our overall long-term costs. So I'd rather pay a little more now to significantly reduce the future. And then we started our PARS 115 program, where we've been paying $200,000 in a year. And one thing I'm looking, and this brings us to a point this year, I think it is opportune time to directly pay down some of our UAL liability this year, where we're putting the PARS trust to use in the future. I'd like to pay down $500,000 this fiscal year to offset, because PERS had a lower rate of return than their target 7% last year, 4.5%, and I want to offset that. So what I'm looking to do this year in the next 2 months is directly pay down additional 500, but taking our PARS money, so this wouldn't have any budget impact on the money that we budgeted. We're still doing our $200,000 a year to PARS, but now using $500,000 of the money that's now in our 115 trust and pay down PERS directly this fiscal year. And so if that makes sense for council, but it would obviously reduce our future costs. And rather than have it just in our PARS 115, it's a good time, it seems, to utilize some of those funds. So if there's any questions about that.
Joe, I'm trying to follow all this. I have to say, I don't really understand how this is all, what the components are here. What makes up the 7% average annual increase? Does that consist of prior pension obligations that we've simply borrowed against? Is it the increasing cost of pensions?
It's all, this is only talking about the pension. So we have 4 pension plans that have to be set up. Safety, which is police and fire. Now our fire in our case is from our fire that we had up to 2012, the obligations related to that, because then now it's with the JPA, our police, and then we have miscellaneous for all other employees. There's 3 much smaller plans. Public safety is by far the biggest cost. There's 2 components of it, a normal cost and an unfunded liability cost. The normal cost is for the most part going up with inflation. The big part is the unfunded liability piece. And that's what's driving this 7% increase. That was over 10%. In some jurisdictions, it's doubling every 5 years. And it's called the unfunded UAL, unfunded liability portion. So what we're doing, the normal costs we pay with normal payroll, and that's not the issue. The issue really is this unfunded piece. And so in the case of the Ross, we currently have $4.3 million of unfunded liability. Now I've shortened the amortization schedule. That would have been about $7 million if we hadn't been doing the steps we have. So we've reduced it to 4.3. But it's an ongoing thing that if PERS, it increases, if PERS misses its 7% mark, it goes up. If they get more than 7% invested rate of return, it goes down. So every year it bounces up and down with whatever PERS rate of return is going to be. So how we've been doing it through for those years, 2016 through 2018, we made an additional 2 million direct payments to PERS to lower that obligation. Since 2019, we've been putting our $200,000 into a PARS 115 trust for pension obligation, but it doesn't go directly to PERS until we direct it to go to PERS. And I'm saying this year, I think it would be a very good move for the town to use $500,000 that's sitting there and directly lower our unfunded obligation. Does that make sense? It is a complex topic and why I have a ongoing relationship with our PERS actuarial, just to make sure, we're following and doing the best strategies we can to keep on top of it.
Well, I understood what you said, and that was helpful. But what is our obligation to the state with respect to the unfunded liability? Do we have to retire a portion of that every year? Is that part of the 7%? Are they charging us interest on something that's unfunded because they back it up? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, so I'm going to go into the numbers a bit that's in here, just to state them. That's in the report, the staff report. So there's two components. And yes, we have a minimum payment we have to make. Now, I've accelerated our minimum payments by changing. I could have left it 30-year schedule. I made it a 20-year schedule. So we actually have to pay more a year in the early years, but then we're retiring the debt quick sooner, kind of like taking a 20-year loan versus a 30-year. So right now, reading, and I'm in the staff report. So for this fiscal year, our normal cost, and that's our normal payroll ones, is as a city, $268,000 a year. I'm not that concerned about that one. That's going up by 2026 to 299,000. So that one goes up pretty much with whatever our wages are. That's what that goes up. It's the unfunded liability. That's now this budget year, 305,000. And that's now the payment schedule we have to make as a minimum. And it's increasing to 464,000 by 2026. And our goal is to lower that 464, or at least make sure it doesn't go any higher than 464. Because what you also learn about PERS over time is whatever estimate you have, it's going to end up higher than that in 5 years later than whatever estimate they provided you. That being said, we've been doing this $200,000 a year, so it isn't going to be higher than they're showing now. But I know it's a little confusing, and if you want, I could actually walk you through all the numbers and things if you want to set up a time to go through it in detail. And so we get these actuarial reports every year, 4 of them with all these schedules. And so you add all the schedules from all 4 up. Beach, Beach, you're muted.
Joe, have we analyzed whether it is good policy to continue to, I guess I'm not phrasing it quite right. What's concerning me is, should we be using $200,000 a year to pay down the pension obligations, in view of the fact that we want to have as much money as we can towards our rebuilding our safety facilities? Have we analyzed whether it makes sense to continue to pay down rather than keeping the money to use it to build the new facility?
And an excellent question. It's really a balancing to keep the operating fund stable in the long run. You want to keep on top of the PERS obligations. Otherwise, that 7% will go to 10% annual increases. So I think you still want to keep our financial stability and sustainability of our operating fund. I think you want to keep on top of the PERS and not let it go. And as much as we need as much money in the facilities, we're not going to have enough cash on hand to build the facilities. There will always be. So I think we save what we can, but I wouldn't do that at the jeopardy of making the operating fund not as sustainable. Then you're reducing the services you're providing every year, and you're paying a lot of interest costs. So think of it, the PERS liability charges at 7% interest. And obviously we'll never be able to have any revenue or earnings that can do 7% a year. So the more you can pay down on that keeps your operating fund, but it is a balancing act. It's a great, which is higher. I think both are important. If you see, we diminished over time, back in 2016 to 18, we directly funded 2 million, so much more than the $200,000 a year. But then our pensions, rather than 460,000 in 2026, it probably would have been like 700,000 at that time if we didn't do that. So we're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by doing what we're doing in our operating fund. So I think you're really trying to do both, but I think you don't want to let go of one for the other.
Okay, but here's, when we start talking about financing whatever we're going to do to our facilities, if some citizen is going to ask, well, why don't we stop paying the $200,000 a year to cut down the pension and use it to build the facilities? Are we satisfied that we've got more than just it's my judgment? We will have some numbers to prove why it's better to continue to pay that down rather than apply it to building new facilities.
I can run numbers and show what the difference if we didn't do our PERS strategy, where our cost would be. So I could gather how much it reduced on our schedules by doing the strategy we've been maintaining. And I think it's important that the community also wants to hear that we are financially responsible and taking measures to keep us stable. And if we didn't do the PERS, I would say we're not being financially responsible. In effect, we're going to have pension eat up our budget. And I think that would irritate citizens if we're all of a sudden cutting police back or public works or services because our pension costs are increasing at such a rate. I think that would bother voters maybe more so than that you had to borrow $400,000 more than we're still going to have to borrow for the facilities. So you're saying $200,000 a year. So in 2 years, would you rather have to borrow 7 million or 7.5 million? Does it, I guess, and we're still, I would say the other thing we're saying, every year we're saving is we're going to put $2 million transfer. I don't think I was going to do that in the CIP portion. I'm recommending increasing our transfer from 550,000 this year to 2 million. So we've been saving where we can within our operating fund to be able to make larger and larger transfers for those facilities. If these pension costs were higher by $150,000 a year, I'd have 150,000, and I could show even this year our pension would have been at least $150,000 higher if not for what we've been doing. So,
okay, well, I'm not disagreeing with what you're recommending. I'm just kind of suggesting that we've got to be prepared to defend this with hard dollar numbers when we start talking about what the cost of a new facility is going to be.
I agree. And I think if we could somehow present that in a graph or in a chart showing what our payment is, because we've been so prudent prepaying down the liability versus what it would have been had we not prepaid, I think that would visually have a lot of impact.
And Joe, you're right that people are upset about pension costs. Of those people who didn't support Measure K, or parcel tax, the main reason people said they didn't support it was they thought the pensions were out of control. So your work paying it down this obligation puts us in a very nice position in 4 years when we go out again to renew the parcel tax.
And this has been excellent questions and dialogue on pensions, and I will look to put some information together and show.
I have another question. Once the building, once we've made the payments for the whatever new facilities we're going to do, then we're going to have an extra $500,000 per year, hypothetically, because we won't need it for the facilities. Would we use, is that correct? And if it is correct, then will we use that to further accelerate the prepayment of the pension liability?
I think we will look at that. That will become an option. Now, some of it, I will say, you're always going to have some ongoing capital. So you'll need some, not 500. Obviously, we're doing extraordinary larger transfers to get, because of facilities. You'll need some. I would also say it would be prudent to set up a building reserve fund, because you're obviously going to always have ongoing, in effect, put some to a fund to pay, repair and do the things on buildings as air conditionings and heaters and roofs. But that being said, yes, there will be extra money that I would say then the target goes back to pension obligation.
Or we
Or
could
not.
perhaps reduce the public safety tax?
That could. Now, public safety taxes for operations.
Mhm.
So it's possible. So yeah, it's kind of looking at the blend of all
Yeah,
of
okay.
them. But I think it's definitely something continuously to look at how we're utilizing our money beyond the current service levels between capital, pensions, and and maybe the public safety tax could be at a lower level. So.
Joe, the Joint Powers Authority for the Ross Valley Fire Authority, that's all factored in, I assume, into what we pay, but are you satisfied that they are on top of the pension situation to the extent they are a participating agency?
That is let's go to our other costs here. So on fire, the bottom bullet, the fire JPA is $2.2 million a year. On top of that, we have, like, the town has pension costs on our old and that, but even just the JPA itself is 27% of our cost. We have that increasing in this model in the forecast at 3.5% per year. This year it went up 1.7%. So we kept it lower, and it's because the financial pressure the jurisdictions were feeling. For prior years, it was 5% plus per year. That being said, our partners have some pressure to keep it down. We only pay a portion of the pensions on the firefighters from 2013 on, because we have, in effect, the same obligation. We have the PERS requirements still at Ross from all the costs up till the time of 2012. So are they managing the pension? The pension costs are not being managed nearly to the extent we manage them here at the town on that side. So, and we have some of the costs, but not other parts of the costs aren't ours. They're the other three partners, because they relate to obligations from pre-2013 and all the retiree and pension obligations on all of the employees, current employees and past employees from that time, because we have that for the town of Ross firefighters. So there's the pensions are going to eat up, which is also a reason that it's going to be hard for the cost to get too high there, because it's not going to be affordable for the other jurisdictions to the pension side on the fire. for the other three that have to pay the obligations from the pre-2013 people.
And Joe, is it correct to say that the reason that, or at least part of the reason why pension obligations are not being handled quite as well by the fire JPA is because our partners are simply not in a financial position to do the sort of things that we're doing?
Agree. Yeah. So 2 of the 4 agencies have obviously a lot of financial pressure. So, yeah. So they don't have the ability to fund probably additional cost. Any other pension costs questions? The other item, the 4th bullet down, let me get my pointer, is the outside services. These are contract services. We contract for a number of services, legal services, accounting, building plan review, chief building official, some planning consultant studies. This is 12% of the cost. We have this going up with the average annual inflation rate of 2.5%. Obviously, periodically, we look at these services to see, does it make sense for some? Do you bring it in-house or contract, which is more advantageous? You know, and it changes over time. And we did bring building in, and we did save a significant amount of money, and I think provide a higher level of service by bringing building inspections in-house versus having contract. Others, for now, I think the contract service mix is working well, but obviously that has to be reviewed periodically to see what's the right mix of contracts versus staff. And we talked about the fire department JPA. Are there any questions on any expense items? And it could be beyond these, or before I move on to more of a summary of the combined effect of the revenues and expenses. Okay, and obviously, if any of you have any questions later, you think of something, just give me a call and we could go through any of this. I know in your staff report, there's a lot of detail, so, and the numbers in the table. So if you have questions, just let me know. So to bring the summary, you know, we are fundable sustainable over the next 5 years. We have small surpluses, and you know, and I would guess any additional surplus for now is going to be used to help to fund the facilities. That priority right now of getting as much money in the facilities as we can. And we talked a lot about the CalPERS. OPEB is another good story, though. The OPEB retiree healthcare cost. This is a significant cost that's increasing for a lot of jurisdictions. Our operating fund cost is 0 for this. And I do not know of any, I'm not aware of other jurisdictions in our position. We as a town have always provided the minimum required under PEMCA of retiree health care. So A, we have a low cost to begin with, but B, we have put it in a Section 115 trust that now is funded at a higher level than our all of our cumulative liabilities over time. And we actually have an OPEB asset. And I'm not aware of anybody else who has an asset under OPEB, meaning we pay $0 a year and we have enough set aside that now actuarial, obviously could change 30 years in the future, but for now, it looks like the actuarial shows it will forever pay the obligations of the pension costs, retiree healthcare costs. So that's another place that we are in a better financial position because we have, A, we started with the minimum, but B, we funded it with the Section 115 program. and been at a healthy level. Now, the last bullet's a big one. This is then the forecast. In November 2016, we passed Measure K. That's our public safety parcel tax. It is now at $1,069 a parcel per year. In fiscal year, it goes up by inflation. It will be in the last year of it after the 4 future years is fiscal year ending 25. Meaning fiscal year 26, in effect, will need a new safety tax measure, that or there will be a $1 million shortfall in the operating fund. So that is the other thing out there, is to keep what I'd say is the financially stable. And so it makes it, and obviously, as Julie said, maybe we could lower the tax in the future if once we get the facilities paid for, maybe. Obviously, that will be analysis to be done in a couple of years and where we're at. But this is one to keep up there.
I have a question. Are we looking at having an election for the public safety parcel tax at about the same time that we would be looking to do an election to pass a facilities bond?
That would be one I think we should definitely be considering, because the last thing you want to do is pass a facilities tax, but then that precludes you from getting the operations. So I think that will be a conversations to come up, is do you combine them or have them at the same time? So you know the outcome of both. But yeah, I think that will be a conversation. And remember, we still have to go through the master plan process and
No,
the
I know.
design to get the cost, to know how much it is. We're every number for now, and it's based on conceptual plans, not based on any real design, but more based on concepts.
But the way it's stacking up, we will have those two measures at the same time.
We don't have to, but you may want to.
Want to?
Yeah, I don't think
I would say we don't want to.
Well, but then what you'd have is you'd have the facilities tax. If the master plan process moves through, if we keep it on a schedule and keep it moving, would probably be, or could be as early as, I'm looking 2020, November 2022 or 2023. You don't need to do the operations tax for another year or two after that.
Okay, well, the only point I'm making is, seems to me, it's a terrible idea to let the two of them come at the same time.
Yeah, I sort of agree. I think if we could do the bond measure for the facilities, and I think the process has been really good. So I think that should be smooth without a lot of opposition, or at least horrible negative campaigns. And then a year or two later, renew the parcel tax. That would be my preference. I think that they're both doable given the climate that, the town's in good financial shape and things are moving along nicely. And the process for the facilities has been really outstanding. So those are the sorts of things I think that get these measures passed. But I wouldn't want them together. That'd be my preference.
Yeah, I agree they shouldn't be together. I think we need to spend a little more time analyzing whether the parcel tax should come first and get that out of the way, and then do the facilities tax a year or two later. So maybe even explore accelerating doing the parcel tax a few years before it expires, just to get it over with.
I'd rather wait 8 years. I mean, we also might see when the school's going out for their parcel tax. That's something to put in this map also, this calendar also. When are they renewing their parcel tax? Because that probably shouldn't be the same time. So I don't know.
I think they're sooner than either of these would be for the town, if I recall.
That would be good.
I've had conversations, I can't remember the exact time now with them, so we're in communication.
And they're also on
They're
paper.
likely to be sooner than either of ours are, unless we greatly accelerate it when expiring in 2026.
Julie, I worry if we accelerate it, we'll have people who say, well, you don't really need this now, so I'm going to vote no. Whereas if it's 8 years, we really need it. We can show how it's at 10% of the budget and it's crucial and you just have to pass it. Or, I mean, we really need it passed. But I think those are conversations we can keep having.
Yeah, no, it's good though. We're starting to think about them. I think this is the time we need to, plan how they're going to roll together or not, how to sequence it. And obviously, we'll know the hard part on the facility side. We have a timeline on facilities. Obviously, that could get, what the moving fast would be, but there could be a number of things that delay it or slow that down. So it's hard right now to know when the facilities tax would even be needed. Obviously, we're going on assumption we're going to keep things moving and therefore in 2 or so years be ready for construction. Whether, we could keep that through the whole process.
At a minimum, I think we're going to face some people. We're going to face the appearance that that somebody in town got some kind of a tax measure year after year after year. And that could be a problem. And I don't know how we avoid that, frankly. It's just going to be a fact, but we don't want to aggravate it. We want to minimize the opportunity to take that view by separating them as much as we can, I think.
Okay. Any other council comments on this topic or anything relate to the summary? And there's one more part of this. And just so you know, council members, because the share screen, I can see some of you and not all of you. So please speak up because I can't, and I don't know if Linda could see all council members. I can't. So it's a little awkward I can see some of you to see you have a question. I can't see all 5 of you if some of you have a question. So please speak up if you have questions. And this is just kind of the overall summary, and we've now talked about this, the challenge obviously of the facilities and looking for that council decision in the March meeting or shortly thereafter on what facilities to build and then start that master plan process. Obviously, as part of that, we'll get a more detailed funding plan developed. We've talked a lot about pension costs and we'll continue our strategies on that. I will get back to you with some information that you've discussed about showing how things have changed over time by our additional steps of paying pensions earlier. Now, the fire cost, we talked about, the JPA, they're obviously growing quicker than inflation in past years. I'm still showing the forecast higher than inflation, but only 1% over inflation. We got to be working with our JPA members, and it did this year. I think, obviously we kept this year to 1.7%, but prior years were over 5%. It's going to be a continual look on that. The other part of this is we will potentially be renegotiating the JPA agreement on fire services. And this is a big item. But if the town the town council decides not to build a fire station in Ross, we need to renegotiate the JPA agreement among the 4 partners. That being said, on the operations side, the town should save money, reduce the current cost because we won't have the current all the service we get by having it here, we're not getting, and our cost should, and I would say we'll better go down with a new JPA agreement. So we're likely to see some cost savings if on the operations side, if the council decides not to have the fire station here. But that needs to be negotiated in the coming months if council goes that way. And then we talked about the public tax measure. Any questions on anything relates to the financial forecast? We're going to move to the CIP, the capital improvement plan next, but I want to see if there's any questions before we leave this topic. And we
Do
should
we
also
ask
see if
for
there's
public-
this is
Yeah.
a time to see if there's any public comment out there. And I can't see, I need Linda to see for me because with the shared screen, I can't see.
There is no raised hands at this time. So no public comment.
Okay, are there any other council questions or anything on the operating fund and service side before we move over to the CIP? So we're going to change lens to the capital side. Okay, moving to capital. I will turn it over to Rich to present the draft 5-year capital improvement plan, also known as CIP. So if you hear us saying CIP, it's capital improvement plan. Rich?
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, Mayor McMillan, council members. Today, we're going to take a look at our 5-year capital improvement program. And you can see on this slide our two main challenges. Actually, on the left, we have our public safety building facilities, which Joe will talk about towards the end of the CIP presentation. On the right, you see that's Winship Bridge during the December 2016 storm. We got pretty high up there, but you can see it's dilapidating. And that is one of our other capital improvement program challenges that we'll talk about. So Joe, next slide. So what is the capital improvement program? It's a tool that Joe and I use to identify facilities and infrastructure improvements that need some attention financially and some injection of capital to keep things operating and to keep ahead of deferred maintenance. The plan identifies improvements, costs, and revenues, this particular one, beginning the fiscal year end of 2021, which is coming up, and through the fiscal year end 2025. We update the long-term CIP for the town, which will be part of the budget document we'll be presenting, I think, next month or in April. Next slide, Joe. So the program guides the consideration, selection, and development of capital improvements. So we have a number of ways we figure out what roadway projects, what drainage projects, what facility projects require the most attention. And basically the main consideration is deferred maintenance. What are the roads, drainage facility, municipal drainage facilities and facilities that we have been neglecting that historically, when you defer maintenance, of course, the cost to bring it back up to standards of care accelerate every year. So you want to keep ahead of your deferred maintenance. It's a dynamic document that changes from year to year as these priorities, needs, and fundings change. Next slide. So a review of our capital improvement program. So there's 3 main elements of the CIP. You see 2 of them here is mainly the roadway program is funded by the roadway fund. This year in particular, we're looking at the pavement rehabilitation program consisting of Redwood Avenue. That's the last stretch of Redwood Avenue in front of Roscommon that will receive a full pavement grind and overlay. And the Roscommon from Redwood Avenue to Lagunitas Road, we're going to get that into shape too and get that matching the nice pavement rehabilitation that Ross Valley Sanitation District did for us a little bit over a year ago. So that whole downtown area and along Roscommon will receive new pavement and striping. It'll hopefully will look good for our continuation of our outdoor dining activities. And we'll be restriping the parking. And you may have noticed that we also installed 2 new handicap ramps down in front of Tony Tudo's and the Ross Common to get into compliance and clean up that corner a little bit more. Our other category in our capital improvement program is the drainage portion of it, and that consists of municipal storm drain improvements and our bridges, which currently is just the Winship Bridge, are on our capital improvement program. For drainage this coming year, we're looking at installing a flap gate at the Bolinas Drain. That's the main storm drain stem that we just rehabilitated about 2 years ago for the Bolinas Avenue. That drain drains out underneath the Winship Bridge. I was hoping to include that project as part of the Winship Bridge rehabilitation program, or replacement project. But I felt that we should get that in place. It's a small project. It's probably less than 20 grand, but it will protect the Bolinas neighborhood if the creek rises to a point where the backwater will start coming out of the inlets in Bolinas, and that has happened before. So you can have all the storm drain pipes in the world put into Bolinas Drain, but if you have backwater coming in from the creek, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So this flap gate will help that. We are preparing a storm drain master plan to identify other needs for repair or replacement of our municipal storm drain throughout the town. And we have to look forward to the development of this Corte Madera Creek flood risk reduction and what is going to come from that. We don't really see any need for any capital expenditures for that program. We do need to keep in mind what our maintenance agreement is going to be with the county as far as that project it develops. And then the Winship Bridge project, you may have heard we have some potential for funding issues as the HBP program became oversubscribed. We're moving forward with design and getting the federal element of the environmental, the NEPA portion taken care of. And then we can move into final engineering and hopefully get this under construction by 2022. It's going to be very close. A lot of the funding is still up in the air, but we are working on getting that portion of the construction funding figured out and possibly supplemented by loans or other means. Next slide, Joe.
Can I ask a
I have
question?
a question about the bridge project.
Yes.
If we don't have the state highway funds, why would we take out loans as a town to do it? Why wouldn't we just, wait until the funds became available? I mean, it seems, I hate for us to have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question. Part of the answer is we've come so far in the process, getting CEQA resolved and moving somewhat forward in all the preliminary studies. We've done a lot of work up to date. That's one of the considerations, that we want to keep going and just get the project completed. It also is a hydraulic choke point in the Corte Madera Creek. Besides that, it is also a safety hazard. You've seen the pedestrian walkways kind of collapsing into the pavement there, and it is structurally compromised as well. It's a good question for what we're talking about today is how we want to look at getting the Winship Bridge replaced. We don't have all the answers yet on where exactly the construction funding is going with the Highway Bridge program, but that's definitely worth considering is where are we going to go once we are told perhaps that our construction funding is still 3 or 4 years out. So that's definitely a topic for consideration.
So 2 questions related to that. One is, how much funding roughly were we expecting from the Highway Bridge program? And the second is, if it's such a significant choke point, why can't the county flood money take care of it?
So we're looking at about $2.9 million in construction costs to get the bridge completed, and that we were relying on all of the funding of that to come from the HBP program. The county, the Winship Bridge is not part of the county flood zone 9 work plan. So they would have to revise their work plan to incorporate the bridge into that, into their own capital improvement program for flood zone 9. That's not a simple process. It's not impossible, but that's what would have to happen. It's my understanding also that flood zone 9 funding has its own challenges. So it's unlikely that would take place. They've got their hands full, basically. So,
Rich, I have a couple questions.
yes, Elizabeth.
I'm sorry if I'm just not understanding the capital improvement plan expenses, but you said 2.9, but I see the Winship Bridge replacement saying 2,785,000. Is there some other underneath bridges and drainage? There's all these other figures. Is there some other number that gets added to that replacement cost?
So let's see, the Winship Bridge. So fiscal year 22-23 and 21-22 all kind of roll into the yeah, I see what you're saying. So 2.9, 2.8, it's still kind of an estimate. We're asking, the amount we're asking from the HBP is 2.9. It could very easily get to that. So there's just there's a discrepancy of a couple 100,000, but essentially the target number is 2.9 million. Good catch.
Well, okay, so, but yours, I guess I'm a little confused. We were expecting to have the cost covered by the HPB, but now we're expecting a shortfall by how much for that amount?
I'm not sure shortfall is the right term for it. They're saying it may not be available when we want it. And so we want it in fiscal year end 23. They're saying it may not be available till fiscal year end 24 or 25.
But then do we have some guarantee that we'll get that money?
I would say there's no guarantee that we would get that money.
I feel like this is like a real discussion point that as council members, we should have about whether we want to proceed with this plan or revisit, because in my mind, we've never had this discussion. This is like a totally new potential issue. And we, went forward because it was like, okay, it's functionally obsolete. There's some flooding implication and we've got the money. So my gosh, why wouldn't we do it? Now we've had the rug pulled out from under us on that potentially. And if I had known money was not an issue, I would have certainly wanted, I've said this before, you go to France, they're saving all their bridges and they're saying, that we love old bridges and let's keep them. This is a beautiful old bridge. And I don't believe anybody who is in Winship Park and has followed what the flood implications have been around there would say that Winship Bridge water is, draining and flooding surrounding neighborhoods. It's just not, never has. So again, I really think we should have a conversation about this and not just, put this in line item there and then say there's no appropriate discussion. My other question that I was going to have is it correct that we have no money budgeted for all our other bridges? Because what we keep hearing about these other bridges, and not by you and not by this staff, but in prior years, is there's all this scouring happening on these old bridges, and that they then are at risk for, I mean, at one point we were told all of the bridges in town should be taken down and rebuilt, and not saved and not looked at, for historic preservation or whatever. And then we kind of did revisit that, and I'm not even 100% say I remember how we all came out on that, but we did look at it and decided that there wasn't that need, and that they weren't ready to be, decommissioned and rebuilt or what have you. But if we don't, are we being short-sighted to not fund some kind of regular maintenance there?
Okay, well, the answer to the first part of your question on the need for the Winship Bridge, the other consideration besides its own functional obsolescence is our neighbors to the north in San Anselmo and their San Anselmo flood risk reduction program, which is the removal of that building bridge that what used to be the Lapart restaurant. Their program that involves the removal of that and turning that into a park and certain other downtown improvements, as well as the county's flood control program, are relying on the removal of that building bridge and the replacement of the Winship Bridge for the county's flood control project to work optimally. It can work if the Winship Bridge stays there forever. That's not going to kill everything, but it's going to make things worse for the properties upstream, or it could stop the SAFER project entirely. So that is a consideration that, as a member of the regional Ross Valley watershed, that I believe that we should take into consideration.
Well, I just first follow up here, though. I mean, number one, that further supports first off, that EIR should never have been done separately. I mean, obviously, if the two work together, we should have had one EIR, and that was, in my opinion, a real misstep. But secondly, that further highlights Elizabeth's point, which is, if that's the case, then this should be a flood district budget item and not a Ross Town Council. And I even don't feel like it's, well, I mean, maybe it is fair. It's on that we're noticing this for a budget item, but I just feel like residents should understand, and it should be really called out for residents that, hey, we went from maybe not paying for this at $2.8 million, and then now maybe we are.
Could I add, hold on, could I get back the timing, how this is gonna work? We're not, what we need to be looking at, when we go to construction, absolutely, they're gonna be, that's where the big dollars are. At that time, definitely it's gonna be a conversation with the council and community, and we'll see where the funding sources come. I mean, we still have a ways to go to get the notice of preparation, the easements, and the design complete. The big question is the funding for the construction. And we're working, I mean, let's see, and that absolutely will be brought forward to the council to make a decision. At that time, we'll know, what is the status? We're talking to MTC, Caltrans related to the HBP program in the federal government. We'll know of county flood control. We'll have options to put before, and obviously time to see, are they going to expedite the HBP back to where it was or not? And will there county flood control? But I think what we need to do in the meantime is finish the process and get the notice of preparation, get the easements, and get what we need to have happen to have a shovel-ready project. And absolutely has to come before the council on what the funding source of the construction is to award any contract related to it. So I think the conversation's going to happen, and I think at this time we're still, everybody with this new information has got to do a re-benchmark of how is it going to be constructed. But we still got another part of this process to get there. So it's not like this decision's needed in a month or two. It's going to be needed after the point we have the NOP, the easements, and the design complete. So I don't know, how far out is that, Rich? Is that a year? How many months to?
We're hoping that that's going to be before the end of this year. So I would
That's the
target.
soonest. And that's at probably a quick time for, I mean, hopefully it gets there, but so I think this will be coming back to council is what I'm saying. for
Yes.
this.
One thing is if we're not certain about the state money, are town funds being spent right now that we might never get back? That's one question. And then the other is, I'm not opposed to delaying this because, yes, we're told it's functionally obsolete, but we've also been told it's not dangerous. There's not a danger to anyone here. So I think we need to be really careful not to spend town money when we were expecting state money. And if we're not getting state money, and if the flood district feels this is an important bridge to replace, it should come from the flood district. I think we'll be really in a difficult situation if we're trying to go out for a parcel tax, a public safety tax, and for a bond measure for facilities, if we're asking people to also pay for a flood project that's not coming out of their flood tax money.
Well, I have a question and a comment. My question is, isn't it true that completion of the Winship Bridge project, well, I guess I'm not phrasing it right. The failure to get the Winship Bridge process going is holding up San Anselmo's flood reduction program. Isn't that true?
That it has the potential to delay the San Anselmo flood risk project, yes.
Okay. I think we may have a card to play here to go to the HBP, to go to Caltrans and point out to them that this is a particularly important project, the Winship Bridge, because it's holding up another project.
So a few weeks back, and I'll get to all these questions. A few weeks back, we met with Gerald Huffman's office with flood control and myself and the town of San Anselmo to relay that message. That's exact same message. We've got probably 75% of the bridges being designed in California are stuck in the same situation that the Winship Bridge is. It's it's all over all of the districts in California are impacted, and several in Huffman's district. That when I showed them the list, they were a bit surprised. So the word has been given to that level of the political environment in California. I'm not sure how much they've gone to Caltrans and MTC and said, "Hey, listen, you need to get Winship Bridge funded." So basically, we're doing what we can to that respect to get all eyes on Winship Bridge and how it's impacting the upper Ross Valley. To answer Elizabeth's question on Elizabeth Robbins' questions on the current expenditures for design, we have still about $75,000 obligated by the HBP that we're using to get through the current NEPA process. So, and I've got an application into the HBP for probably an additional 200,000 we're going to need in design. So that's not, there is an element of funding that's not secured yet to get us even to the end of the design process to go into construction. So there are a lot of unknowns here, but with the towns being very careful to not spend our own money on this design process. There were some expenditures on getting the CEQA document, the mitigated negative deck, to a place where we could be happy with its effectiveness and in mitigating the issues. That money is not reimbursable through HBP, but it is reimbursable through the old agreement we've had with flood control. Flood control is going to help us pay for CEQA costs. That agreement expired last year. So when I started the negotiations with the county to get that agreement reinstated with sufficient money to cover CEQA, the whole HBP thing also collapsed right around the same time at the end of 2020. So we're all kind of working together on all those aspects to pull this funding together. And there are a lot of unknowns. Let me just, before I forget, let me answer Elizabeth Breckis's questions on the remaining bridges. We do set aside maintenance funding every year for regular maintenance of the bridge deck and railways. We've completed a scour protection project on the Glenwood Bridge about 5 years ago. And we're still monitoring that for the state of California. The other bridges, the scouring didn't look bad enough to warrant creating an additional project on them. And the structural stability of those bridges are they're reinforced concrete structures that are just not going anywhere. They're built extremely solid construction, even though they're over 100 years old. So I see the need for maintenance of the roadbed and the rails, but I don't see any great scour issues with those bridges. We identified the Glenwood Bridge, but that was about it. We're keeping an eye on it, and we're putting money towards maintenance, but there's no other plans for removing the other bridges in Ross.
Yeah, I have further comment.
Yes.
Well, I guess number one, I'd like to understand what the result of your discussion with the flood district was on reimbursement of CEQA costs. I'd like to understand how much we've paid to date. I mean, I appreciate their staff time. I'm not asking you to give me a figure on that. But there are other outside consultants that we paid, and where are we? How much have we spent on the Winship Bridge? And then the other point is, I would not support spending town money on this. If you get the 200,000 you've applied to from HPB, I would be fine with you proceeding with that, but I don't think that we should do that. I mean, you got to think the town of Ross, like the county of Marin residents, all agreed to fund flood district work, okay? And what do we have in Ross, a place with a lot of flooding, to show for it? I mean, I just think if this is going to be a flood district item, then let it be a flood district item. If it's a, functionally obsolete, I mean, I don't see us having accidents on this bridge. I don't see pedestrians being impacted. I don't see it, being a big problem for people with strollers. And I just really think we should revisit and think about whether or not we're going to spend this kind of money, because it's a lot of money. And frankly, I mean, 2,800,000, that's a lot of money that could be in facilities. And so I just don't agree that we should be going forward with this until and unless we know this is funded by somebody else.
I agree with that. I was going to ask, if we don't have that $200,000, what's the process to determine whether we go ahead and how to pay? Because my tendency would be to say, if we don't have the money, we shouldn't pay for it. We shouldn't go ahead unless a flood district pays or the state pays.
Right. So, of course, Joe and I have very limited amounts that we can approve to move forward. I think Joe has a $50,000 limit. So anything over that has to go through council to move forward. So we're not going to we can't spend anything without going through you. That's over Joe's or my limited amount. To answer the question on how much we spent on CEQA that we're awaiting reimbursement on from the county, that's somewhere in the range of $50,000 that we had to pay, but we are hoping to get that reimbursed from the county.
But you indicated that you asked the county to agree to pay our CEQA expenses, and that was a year ago. So what was their answer?
Well, it wasn't a year ago. That was like, yeah, at the end of December, so about 4 or 5 months. They said they're looking into it. That's a separate part of the county. So from the flood control district that is handling that reimbursement. I will get an update on that because that's something we need to know. But the bigger issue of the highway bridge program was kind of overshadowed everything else. We need to get this 200,000 for design approved, and then the 2.9 million for construction before we can move any further.
Well,
You know-
I don't know what to say
Sorry.
further, but I would hope that we would have further council discussion today or before we authorize further expenditure of funds and uncertain to be reimbursed.
Mhm.
I just wanted to echo the point that Elizabeth Breckus made about this should have all been one EIR, because the next thing we need to do at our regular council member is get back to the EIR process for the Corte Madera Creek project. And I'm no further, I've been asking this on and off over time. What's the relationship between the Winship Bridge project and the Corte Madera Creek project? In other words, we now have some data, I'm still looking for it, but I'm assured that it's there, about the difference that the different alternatives make as to possible flooding, whether it's a 25-year flood or a different flood. But none of that seems to take into account whether we build the Winship Bridge project or not. I recall when we dealt with this earlier, it seemed like the impact of the Winship Bridge on events downstream was not going to be that great. I don't think any of the property owners south of the Winship Bridge believe that, but
Mhm.
it's so technical, I really can't say much more on that because I don't really understand the hydrology of it.
Right. So
But I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, Rich.
So I can answer that, and it's a question that I hope everybody eventually understands. The Winship Bridge and the San Anselmo flood risk reduction project they're hydraulically separated from what's happening downstream or at the Lagunitas Bridge in downtown Ross. The reason for that is in hydraulically separated. What I mean is in the larger floods, the 10, 25, and 100-year floods, because when the water floods up by the Winship Bridge or it comes out at the old Lapart restaurant and floods down San Anselmo Avenue and into Bolinas and Fernhill and down Shady Lane, all of that flood water, whether it's in the channel coming over bank or more of it in the channel, it all comes back together into one flooding mass just upstream of Sylvan Lane. So none of these projects add water to the overall runoff. So the X plus Y of the CFS upstream come together into Z, and then it comes through the Lagunitas Bridge. So whatever's happening north of Sylvan Lane doesn't really impact the hydraulics in the larger storms down by the Lagunitas Bridge and our Corte Madera Creek flood risk reduction project. That's an important concept to remember. That yes, the Winship Bridge and Safer project do impact the houses along north of the Sir Francis Drake Bridge. But once they get in the realm of where the Ross Creek confluence with the Corte Madera Creek, it all comes back together and it's the same flow, basically. I hope that answers your question.
But by the same token, if there's flooding in San Anselmo because of the Winship Bridge, some of that may make its way back into Ross, right?
Yes, it'll make it into the
Hill, et cetera. But I see what you're saying. It's separate from the Corte Madera Creek issue.
right. It'll flood the Bolinas neighborhoods and the Fernhill neighborhoods and the part of the Shady Lane neighborhoods. Maybe the northerly part of Sylvan, But before it gets to the Lagunitas Bridge, it all comes back together and into one big flooding, no longer a split type flow until it gets downstream from the Lagunitas Bridge. So
And regarding that flow, is it correct that the Winship Bridge has never been a bottleneck? Is that right? That water has never broken out right at that bridge?
I think the issue is that it probably hasn't, because it's all breaking out of the over the banks up in San Anselmo. So we never got the historical flow before we did a bunch of improvements, but maybe back in the 1800s, we got a lot more flow in the channel because we weren't building bridges over the creek. So the answer is it's likely. I don't ever recall it going over bank. The FEMA shows that it does go over bank on the 100-year storm, and the Stetson model shows that it does go over bank, and it definitely will go over bank if we don't build a bridge and the SAFER project does move forward. It'll hit that bridge and start flooding Sir Francis Drake. It's not going to go uphill into Winship Park, but it'll flood down into Sir Francis Drake and impact those houses that front along Sir Francis Drake.
That's like yet another reason why this should be a flood district project and not a town of Ross project.
So how are we going to bring this discussion to some kind of direction? Because I think in order to give direction on a budget, we need to have some opinion. I mean, I think that I think Elizabeth and I are pretty clear on what we would think is the right thing, but
Staff could bring an item back to council at probably the April meeting to have, and obviously see what happens in the meantime on it. But would be part
Well,
of.
isn't it true, though, that for the moment, we shouldn't put an expense for the Winship Bridge into our budget? Because currently, things could change, but currently, we are of the understanding that others will pay for the Winship Bridge.
Right, and the line item for expenses matches the line items for revenue on this. So there is no net cost that we're considering. There's a little timing issue, but in the end, it's the revenue and expenses match over the 5-year period.
And the revenue isn't from the town of Ross. The revenue is outside sources.
For the purposes of the budget, that's correct.
It seems like San Anselmo would also have an incentive to support us if we went back to the flood district and said, if we can't get the highway funds, the flood district should pay for this, particularly if we're not going to do the full Corte Madera Creek project. Now, whether that money that was to be used there could be used for something else, I guess, is a different question. But
Yeah, San Anselmo staff are watching very, very closely on how this all pans out. And one of the options that could happen is, so the HBP program provides a pathway where you can borrow from your programmed funds that haven't been obligated yet. It's called advanced construction, where if the town puts the money out now, the HBP program will pay you back once it becomes available. And according to currently what they're saying would be 2024, 2025. But there's no guarantee in 2024 and 2025 that those funds are going to be obligated. They could be completely oversubscribed then too. You just can't, we can't read what the economic forecast is going to be like that. But if that's the case, the county said they would be willing to put that money forward with the guarantee that we would get reimbursed from HBP in the future. That's a current discussion we're having with the county.
And I think there's nothing like money in the bank. Julie and I discovered that when we were remodeling the school and had a promise of state money. We tore down the school, put up pet portables, and then the state money wasn't available. And I don't know that that money ever became available. We actually succeeded in rebuilding the school because the economy was so bad that the bids came in much lower than ever expected. But that money, even though they said eventually it will be available, it wasn't. So I'm pretty conservative when I would say we need a promise and money in the bank before we move ahead. I don't like the idea of borrowing.
Right. So we, like Joe suggested, I think we should bring this back at the April council meeting. I'll have more information with discussions with both San Anselmo and flood control and the local assistance folks up at Caltrans and MTC. And we'll bring that information back in April. How does that sound?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So moving on to the last part of our CIP projects review is the facilities portion funded through our facilities fund. That's the public safety building repairs and a master plan for the new rehabilitated facilities. The master plan is in the works to determine the needs and the costs. And of course, and Joe's going to talk a little bit more about that and that process. We have the town hall building accessibility we are looking at currently to make sure town hall meets the accessibility requirements of local and state accessibility, the ADA requirements. Ross Common Landscape Rehabilitation Master Plan, we have received responses to the RFPs to develop the master plan and design and determine the cost for those improvements. And we're also looking at adding another EV charging station at the post office in conjunction with the repaving of the post office parking lot. Next slide.
So Joe, is this a time when I would make comments about the EV station or?
Sure.
Yeah, this would, yeah, definitely comments
Yeah.
on any of the items on here.
On the topic of trying to have our town sustainable, certainly, electric vehicles make sense. And I first thought, having EV stations makes sense for the town, but I have actually just come to the conclusion that I'm not sure we want to set up EV stations for a couple of reasons. First, everyone in town who owns an electric vehicle has their own charging. If you have the money to buy a Tesla or one of the electric cars, you're putting in your own electric charging station at your home and you set it to charge overnight when electricity is the cheapest, and then it goes for 3 hours or whatever. If we do this, so people in town won't be using this. They're not going to be parking at the post office for 3 hours. And I'm not sure we want anybody to park downtown for 3 or 4 hours. So I don't think it's helping Ross residents. It takes a place out of the post office. And if we don't charge for the electricity, we'll be on that list that's already out there in the county. Where can you charge your car for free? And people will come into Ross, park in Ross, charge their car and leave. And we'll be giving up a parking space and providing free electricity for no real reason because our residents don't need it. I think if we wanted to be sustainable, we could certainly try to have all of our town vehicles be electric and have have charging stations in the redone town facilities and parking lot. And if we wanted to go further, we could offer some sort of break on permits for families who want to put in an electric charging station at their homes. But I'm not sure that a post office station serves the town. It takes up a parking place, residents don't need it, and we'll be losing money giving out free electricity. So those are my thoughts about that.
Any other comments on the EV station? It's a great topic, and this is where we want to address it, whether we want to move forward with something like this or not.
Yeah, can I ask, it's a free charging station?
No, this particular charging station, unlike the one that we installed a few years back on the post office, we would have this one set up to that they would have to pay by credit card, but we'd have to set up the infrastructure and an account to receive that payment and process it through our accounts. But no, it wouldn't be free.
Well, I guess I would share Elizabeth's point, because I just bought myself a Tesla, and I am putting in a high powered thing, but I just plug it in and it's fine because I drive so little. But I mean, parking is limited when school is in session. And so, yeah, limiting the spots to residents is probably not a good idea. And if we already have one, I don't know why we need another.
I would add my voice to that, to those who agree with Elizabeth Robbins.
So,
I'm sorry. Could I
no, go
just-
ahead, Bill.
I think we ought to look at this in a little broader context, though. Will it bring people to the business district? There are now some charging alternatives, and I don't know what level this charging station would be, but there are some that could give you a substantial charge in a short period of time. And maybe someone would be coming to town and decided to go to Tony's or Tea and Crumpet or the bike store or something while they're getting a topping up or whatever. Now, maybe only one station isn't enough to even get somebody to consider that, but that's another possibility. There are a lot of programs to promote this. I'm on the board of MCE on behalf of Ross. They talk about this a lot. There was just a presentation to the climate action section of MCCMC about this. That was incredible. It was really good, although I think it's more oriented towards larger municipalities like San Rafael or Novato, where you have office buildings where this could be an amenity that could be installed. But I mean, I appreciate the skepticism about whether in the little town of Ross, where parking is tough and we have to go to the post office and we have to find a parking place at the post office, this is really what we want to do. But I would just urge we look at this in a little broader context to make sure that whatever decision we make we've taken everything into account.
Okay.
Council, if I can just chime in, I'm Ross's representative on the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership. And one thing that we do talk about is EV infrastructure. And if you look at it kind of on the statewide or on the regional level, part of the push with facilitating the installation of EV charging stations is to make it so that electric vehicles are an alternative that you can have to gas vehicles anywhere. So in Ross, it's a small town and most people will have charging stations, but the idea is to make it so that if you're able to go to a gas station somewhere, you can also assume that you'll be able to find a charging station. So someone coming from out of town, if there's someone who works in or near Ross, if there's someone who's a renter, possibly in an ADU or in one of the downtown apartments, the idea is that you can have an electric vehicle and still feel confident that you'd be able to find a place to charge it, even if you don't have it in your garage. So that's another thing to consider when we're adding this EV infrastructure around the town and throughout the region.
Workforce, maybe some teachers, maybe people coming to work on houses might be reassured if they knew they could find someplace locally to get a charge.
So as far as the workforce and including the police department, the charger that we currently have in the parking lot attached to the police department is free to Ross employees. Just to note that. But again, the one at the post office would be a public one. We would look at installing it at the parking spaces closest to Lagunitas Road towards the end there. I would take up 2 parking spaces to have it. And but yeah, we would need to know whether we should shelve this particular one or if we want to move forward with it. I would really need to know within the next month, because I wanted to install it with, again, the Ross Post Office parking lot improvements. So
you would take.
I would say I wouldn't be in such a hurry to do it. I mean, I think it. I mean, I guess you're repaving, but I don't know right now that basically a gas station in the center of Ross is the right way to use our precious parking space. I do think that eventually, yes, people are going to be wanting to have electric charging stations, but again, most of these are going to be private home based. And when you're driving around, you can't count on one being open where you can just drive up and get a charge for 3 hours. So, it's not clear that it's a huge benefit, and it does hugely detract from the downtown parking, which has become very compromised with, especially now with that the school using the preschool daycare using much of Lagunitas for a drop off. There are about 5 or 6 spaces that are now gone from that. So I think we should be careful about the downtown parking.
Didn't he say that it's just going to take up one additional spot, so 2 spots total? So I don't think it's really that material. Is there a way to limit the amount of time someone could park in the charging station? Could you say 2 hours max?
Yes.
But then we have to enforce it, right? Then you
Well,
gotta-
yeah, but California is going to be required to only sell electric cars starting in what, 2035? I mean, this is the wave of the future. Gas stations are going to become obsolete, and so are gas cars. And I think it's important to recognize that and make a first step. So I would hate for us to just shut this down because we're going to be saving 1 parking spot.
Well, we're saying we already have one, or I heard 2 spots, so I'm confused.
Right. So each station has 2 charging heads on either side of it. We installed just 2 years ago a brand new charging station, 2-headed charging station in the parking lot, the town hall parking lot up along the wall of the police station there, just before you turn the corner into the fire bay. So that is available. We're charging our hybrid car that the building department uses on that, and the other head is sometimes used by members of the police station who have electric cars, and it's definitely open to any employee of the town of Ross.
Does that go for council members?
That would be up to Joe.
I vote yes.
Well, I guess you're so this would be the only one in the post office area, and yet it would take 2 spaces. So that means if you don't have a electric car, you can't park there, right?
That's correct. Is that right, Chief? I think that's how it works.
You also can't park there if you're not charging, right? You can't just park your electric car there. You need to be charging.
Right.
Yeah, you have to be charging and using it. You can't just be an electric vehicle. So it is regulated to that effect.
How much does this cost, Rich?
It costs between 25 and 30,000. Maybe a little more.
Rich, which level of charging station is this going to be?
I believe these do provide you have the choice of doing the fast charge or the regular charge. Depends on the electric panel that we're going to be tying into that, but we can always upgrade that as well. But the intent is to have all levels of charging time when someone plugs in.
So you would have fast charging would be available.
Yeah, so it'd be a 2-headed charging station. So there'd be 2 parking stalls next to that existing handicap stall there at the far end of the post office parking lot near Lagunitas.
Does every other town in Marin have a publicly available charging station except for Ross?
I'm not sure.
And is there any grant money that we could get to pay for this thing?
There may be. That grant money comes and goes and becomes available. It's my intent to fund it with some grant money like we did on the one with the post office. Both the charging station and our new EV vehicle were both partially grant funding. It's not a great amount of money, but it's it'll help. So we will pursue that.
TAM has got some programs for grant money for putting these things in, but I think it may just be available in selected areas where the populations probably do not have other facilities available to them.
Yeah. And the state has a few programs as well. But none of them really pay the entire cost, maybe 10, 15% of the entire cost. You get a little grant money to help you along.
But if you're thinking of doing this in a month and there's not grant money already, then this is coming out of the town's budget, right?
Right.
One other note here is that the technology apparently is changing fairly quickly, with some of the big manufacturers like Tesla promoting faster charging even above what's currently available, trying to get it down to like 10 or 15 minutes. But will all cars take that? And does that degrade the batteries? So these are open questions. Perhaps if we do go ahead, we would want to do something that would support future changes as well. And I have no idea what the technical details are. I assume, Rich, we're talking about if you're refinishing the parking lots, then that would be a good time to do any trenching or whatever to add the additional electrical.
Yes.
So maybe we could if we do go ahead, kind of overdo that a little bit, just so that we don't have to repeat the process when it turns out we need even more power.
What I can do is we would just install the conduit under the pavement and then have a riser where we want this thing in the future. So we don't need, I will retract that we need to make a decision. So we can put in the infrastructure such that we don't have to tear up the pavement at a later date. And we could go that route.
Yeah.
That being said, for our budget, we do need a decision. So I guess, part of is to get what should we put in the budget or not in the budget that you're going to see at the budget meeting coming up. I can't remember if it's late April. I think it's late April, the hearing. So I guess
We do.
it would be good to have the thought. So straw poll between the 5 council members of a yes or no to put in the budget.
I mean, I would be a no, except that if it comes down to, because I don't know that it really benefits, the greater community, and it certainly doesn't benefit Ross, but if putting in infrastructure is not a huge expense and you're redoing the parking lot, then I don't see anything wrong with that. Then we've sort of set the stage, and then we can at our leisure talk about what's the exact best way to do this, and should we do it?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I'm, persuaded by the fact that, it's true, Julie's point, that we're going to be all electric. And I see the rise of these cars, and it's incredible how many people in the county have them. I just feel a little guilty because it seems like, there are people that will not benefit from it's 2 spots. And I still support looking at our post office agreement and making sure that that the 3 spots dedicated to the employees is really in that lease, because that's 3 spots and I never see that 3 spots taken. So I'm just confused. I mean, maybe we could look at that at the same time. But I would be supporting putting it in. And I think then Bill's point is a good one is, should we push this off a year and see whether there's some changes that make whatever we put in a better option?
I would support putting, as Rich has suggested, putting in the conduit and so forth, but not deciding now to put in the actual charging station.
We have 2 more council members so I'm hearing conduit, yes. So far I've heard 1 in favor of putting in the budget and 2 not, and we still have 2 council members to go.
Well, I'll go. I think we should put it in. I think this is the wave of the future. We need to show support for sustainability. I think we should explore getting grant money to help pay for it, but I think we should go ahead and put it in.
Okay. And Bill, I think you're the last one on this one.
Yeah, no, I would support putting it in, or alternatively, if we don't want to go the whole route, at least putting the conduit in while we're resurfacing, and then when we know more, completing the installation. If we're going to see faster and faster charging, it does give us the ability to limit the time, not 2 hours, but 30 minutes. Now we can, in that 2-hour time window, charge 4 cars if there's the demand.
Right.
It does go at the end of the parking lot then, Rich, not closer to the businesses?
That's
Because
correct.
a plus was attracting people who might want to have lunch at Marché Aux Fleurs or something like that. And they're running a little low, but they can charge the car and have lunch. So it's a twofer, and they'll drive over from Mill Valley or something like that. But if it's at the end of the parking lot, that adds a bit more of a walk. I don't know about my idea of promoting the business district. Anyway, I don't want to make this more
Good comments. For now, it will be in the budget. Obviously, at the time of the budget, we're going to have it in the draft budget, and you can tell us yay or nay officially at the April budget hearing, but that gives us direction. So
Yeah, I'll bring back more information on the grant funding.
I think it would be helpful also to know how many other jurisdictions have a publicly available charging station, and if they have time limits, and if they're charging for the charge.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, particularly, I think San Anselmo has some plans to move ahead on this. You know, they had 1 or 2 stations, but I think they've got a bigger plan. So if we could get some of that type of information, that would help us understand, I think, a little better what the options are.
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks for your direction. And we'll move to the next slide.
I'm just wondering,
Unless there's some-
we've been going for 2 hours. I'm just wondering if now would be a good time to take a little break.
I would think that makes sense. I thought we'd get to the end, but let's take a break now. How many minutes, Mayor?
My phone says it's 11:03, so could we resume at 11:10, a 7-minute break? Does that sound good?
Mhm.
All right, I'll see you in 7 minutes.
Thank you.
Please mute your phone, and thank you.
Go ahead.
So
Joe.
Joe, you moved
Okay.
a couple of slides ahead
Yeah,
there.
I'm looking, here we go.
All right. So continuing with the projects review for facilities. So we're looking this year at, well, this is kind of open for discussion today, how we want to move forward with some current capital expenditures. So we're looking at some downtown outdoor dining. Maybe we could expand that along Redwood or into Ross Common, maybe construct some parklets or that sort of thing. Very wide open category there if we want to expand that aspect of the downtown business and dining. That corner on Bolinas and Sir Francis Drake, where it's all basically weeds and then there's a bus stop there, we could without too much difficulty have a quick landscape design of that, run it by council and design review if necessary, and come up with some landscaping there. Another popular program that has been gaining some popularity here, especially with the people in the Laurel Grove neighborhoods, is extending the ped pathway from the current design project, which ends at Canyon. Take a look at it, maybe some capital expenditures to extend that up to Skyland, or even as far as Macon Grade, or just inside our town limit. And then the Natalie Coffin Green Park parking lot area, it's in fair shape, but it gets worse every year. We could look at repaving that, and we're also looking at replacing the pedestrian bridges at the park, at our portion of the park. And that's something we could discuss. We've looked at ways to maybe add additional parking spaces at Natalie Coffin Green Park. We looked at it 9 ways to Sunday, and we may be able to gain one more, but it's very compact in there. So that's not a part of what this parking lot program would be. It would just be repaving and rehabilitating that pavement. So any discussion on these topics?
I would be all in favor of enhancing the Bolinas or Francis Drake corner. And also where Kittle Park is, right across from Town Hall. RPOA was exploring doing some type of an improvement there. I don't know what the status is of that, but maybe they would be willing to partner on the Bolinas SFD corner as well as the Kittle Park area. Also, I think some type of improvement is needed along Laurel Grove. I have been nearly hit by cars when I'm walking there with my dog. People are going so fast. I know I've expressed this before, but there needs to be a little more of a shoulder or something to make it safer. There's a ton of kids who live along there, and I know there's a lot of residents who are interested in privately contributing to help that as well.
Good.
I agree with Julie's points. I don't know how we could encourage some funding of Laurel Grove, because I think that would be a nice situation. We have expended a lot of money there. And, I think you could also make the point that, Redwood Avenue has no sidewalks as well. I mean, there's a number of different areas that are kind of similar. So it's like, I hate to just put all the money in Laurel Grove, even though I agree with the need. And then I certainly, I like all of these ideas. I did want to also mention, Julie at one point had this idea of the crosswalk near the Old Ross Hospital, and whether that should be lit up and or, a sign. And I kind of thought, no, because I drive that, twice a day and I don't ever have a problem. But actually really recently, the sun was blinding me there. And I did feel like it was actually unsafe. And so I just paid attention to it since we had that discussion, and I could actually consider, maybe now they're doing Sir Francis Drake, maybe it might be not too late to mention it or ask about it.
I think that crosswalk is in Kempfield, Rich, isn't that right?
That's correct.
Oh,
Yeah,
but it's a Ross used,
totally.
crosswalk. So there's no reason why we couldn't at least ask about it if others agree.
Yeah, it's really dangerous. And a lot of kids who live on the other side use that to go through the hospital down the path to get to Ross School. And years ago, there was a little girl in middle school who was hit by a car in that crosswalk. So it is pretty dangerous. So maybe we could explore partnering with the county on getting, a button and some lights.
Okay.
Can I ask about the downtown outdoor dining? Are we I know we have those, what do you call those? The park dining, or the ones that have been built for the pandemic?
The parklet?
Parklet.
Yeah.
Is there anything to do with that situation that we're contemplating, or this is 5 years, so we're just assuming those will go away? Or would we be okay with having that kind of a thing come out for a certain part of the year into the future? And is there anything like any reach out we've done to any of these restaurant owners, or building owners, I guess, to ask like what can or would be helpful instead of just having our staff idea about it. I mean, I'm wondering if we've gotten that input.
Patrick, you want to?
Yeah, I'll chime in. Every decision staff's made has been in concert with the building owners and the restaurant and business owners downtown. We have a very good dialogue going right now, especially during the pandemic, trying to respond to the needs of our businesses. And so far, including the outdoor dining event that we held, it's been pretty positive reception. For the parklets right now, what the program is, it's in response to the public health orders. So the agreements, they're encroachment agreements to use parking spaces for outdoor dining. And they expire at the end of the public health orders, the stay-at-home orders. So once the public health emergency is lifted, then we'll reconsider those encroachment agreements. And we'll have a conversation with the business owners, with the community, and with the council as to whether or not we want to continue that use of the streetscape, or go back to the way it was, where that was just used for parking. And that's a conversation that's taking place across the country in all sorts of downtowns. So that's something that could definitely continue into the future. And yeah, every time we do any type of event or promotion for downtown, we are working directly with the business owners to try to make sure that they're benefiting from it. And we hope to continue that relationship.
I have a question about these outdoor facilities I see being constructed. Marche Au Fleur has a nice new tent. In San Anselmo, Hilda's just got a beautiful redwood deck. Is that coming? It can't be coming from San Anselmo, and I know it's not coming from Ross. Is it coming from the county? Is somebody funding this? These restaurant owners have been so hard hit. Where, how are they paying for this?
A lot of them are making that investment to cover the cost to try to make some kind of business. In our case, the town is giving kind of micro grants to facilitate these outdoor dining areas. But I think in a lot of cases, the businesses themselves are paying the majority of the cost for these types of facilities.
Really?
We're giving grants to build these.
Well,
I'm okay with that. I'm just questioning.
So we received a quick build grant related to the COVID outdoor dining needs from TAM last year. It was $15,000. So we discussed with TAM whether we could use some of this money to help build these facilities in the right of way. They said that'll be perfectly fine when we go to submit for reimbursement. So that whatever grant money we're giving to these or offering to these businesses for the parklets would come from grant money from TAM.
That being said, I was good, even if it was not eligible to TAM, to give businesses like up to 2,000 each on a matching to help out. So I don't know if all of them were, if the one was, but I would be good giving grants, a matching grant to help the businesses during this in the match. But we have been using the rich, but I thought one of them, I don't know. So,
yeah.
Well, I don't know if maybe I should have mentioned or should have asked about this, because I was thinking about it when we were looking at the revenues and the business taxes. But I think it was like a 40 grand figure. I was kind of wondering about that and like whether, we could at this time waive certain business taxes to commercial property, commercial businesses, not property, but commercial businesses. And even, as we quote, open up and hopefully do experience a boom, consider waiving certain expenses like, I don't know, hopefully we're not charging encroachment fees, permit fees, but, signs, new businesses, whatever. I mean, if we ended up eating some of that, but we ended up, facilitating a lively downtown and or new businesses coming in, it would just be something we should maybe consider.
And we have implemented some of those strategies. So for instance, the inspection costs for the outdoor dining, those have been waived. Also for building permits, for our downtown businesses, we've deferred payments of fees. So we've allowed them to get the business up and running before we collect all the fees. So in that case, we're still being made whole as far as collecting the fees, but we're giving the businesses a little bit more kind of a cushion to actually get a return on their investment. So we are employing those strategies, and of course we're open to expanding how we do that to help our businesses.
Well, I love hearing that. Maybe we could, just have an article in the morning after just to tell people how we are trying to, keep Ross downtown strong and even, highlighting things that we might, do in the future or something. I even wondered, this was a very off the cuff idea. But whether we could, give each of those restaurants, $40 per resident with a right for residents to go in and spend the $40, so they just have some guaranteed revenue. I don't know, it wouldn't be that much money when you look at it. 800. Well, I don't know. I haven't done the math. It's very much talking out loud, but I just wondered what we could do, because I feel like, when you see how many people are sitting in that parklet of the new business, the Crumpets one, it's so few people. I just don't understand how they're making it.
I agree. Working to support the local businesses is in the town's best interest. We benefit from having a downtown with businesses, and they are all suffering. So that's certainly something I would support, is helping out as we can with the goal of keeping them viable, because that enhances the town.
Is this a capital project, though?
We might be going astray. Maybe we should consider agendizing this for a future item.
Yeah, but actually we could talk about when we get, I'm fine talking about here. We had it up here for downtown outdoor dining, but it's going to lead into the next conversation of what we should do, look to put in next year's budget. But that being said, what I'm hearing, and staff is in agreement, we want to help support our downtown businesses and help strengthen them how we can. So it's not particularly all capital, but it relates to the next item too.
Right.
I think we've got the flavor on the downtown. Other thoughts from others on these items on the list, or other ideas too, to continue, but this is very helpful to have this dialogue.
I have an item that may be on some other screens that I'd like to raise as a capital item, but I'm not sure when the right time.
Now it's open for, I guess it's these or any others, because that's one of our questions is anything else. So well, these are items we're not in the CIP right now, if I recall, Rich.
Right, that's right.
Outside of, not even the Nelly call. Yeah. So part of this is, should we be putting these or other items into the CIP? So Councilmember Kircher, if you want to state your thought, if it's a capital item.
Yeah, it's an item that I consider a dangerous item, which is those telephone poles that are power poles on Sir Francis Drake that are leaning into the road. It may just be my imagination, but every time I drive north, it looks to me like they're leaning just a little more. One of these days, physics seems to indicate they'll just fall over during an earthquake or something. Maybe this is a long-term thing, but I think they're dangerous, really. And I don't know that Ross should be paying for this. I don't know. I don't know, Joe, you and I have talked about this a little bit. What are the alternatives? But it's not just an eyesore. I think it's just plain dangerous.
Right.
I'm not saying they're going to fall over tomorrow, but an earthquake, or maybe worse, the ground is saturated and then we have an earthquake, and one or more of those things falls over, that could be a disaster. So yes.
That's a good point. And PG&E has actually identified a few poles around town, mainly up in the hills around Upper Road, where the pole was actually being undermined and needed to be reset and the guy wire reset. We never, or I never told PG&E about these. But they are out inspecting all of these things aggressively. I definitely have contacts at PG&E that I can mention those poles and have them give an inspection, at least of the foundation and the guide wires that are holding it in place, and have them take a look at it. But they pulled a couple encroachment permits over the past 6 months to do exactly that on some other poles in town. So this is something I can ask them, and it is their expense. They own the pole.
Is it? Okay, well, yeah, it just looks like a serious situation to me, with them definitely leaning into the road. And these are, I assume they have high tension electric lines on them.
Mhm.
That could be a real problem, impeding our emergency vehicles or falling on some vehicle. So
Is
I would
this
definitely like them to look at those.
where exactly? So I'll know when I drive up Sir Francis Drake, which ones should I look at?
Yeah, so as you're heading north, when you pass the Ross sign, it's a bit beyond that. And there's a series of 3 or 4 of them that are all leaning towards the road.
Is it
Yeah.
north of Lagunitas?
No, it's south of Lagunitas.
Okay, just as
So-
you're entering town. Okay,
So leaving Kentfield, you see the Ross sign, now you're in Ross. You proceed a bit, and then on the left are the leaning poles.
okay, good. I'll take note of that.
Right.
So it sounds like there's some popularity in the Bolinas Sir Francis Drake corner landscaping. Is that a project we'd like to get on this year for the budget? That's an easy one. The Laurel Grove Ped Pathway Extension, I'm hoping to coincide that work with another Safe Pathways grant that would maybe be eligible within a year or two. There are some smaller projects we could do to extend it from Canyon up to, say, Winding Way or something like that. So, but I don't think we need to consider it, but I would like to maybe wait a year on looking further into the pathway extension. So, how does that?
Yeah, I think that all sounds good. I would also maybe Joe, you could talk to Jeff Koblik about RPOA's interest in helping with some of the landscaping beautification projects. So I think they have adequate funds. They're having a robust membership drive right now.
The one, and part of it's having staff time to work with them too. For example, the Kittle Park, the reality is the priorities have been on a lot of other things. So it's having the time to work on like a Kittle Park, which is not an easy one really to figure out how it should look. I mean, it's an awkward space where it's at and how it's situated in the roadways and with the detention basin nature of it. So part of it's having time and direction and a level of professionalism of how do you take that site to the next level.
Right. The difference between Bolinas and Kittle Park would have been a sort of an amenity that we would need to add accessibility improvements and pathway and perhaps a bench or something like that. The Bolinas corner would be more just a landscaped area. We wouldn't make it a destination for anybody. So we'd be able to get away from that, the Kittle Park issues with requiring accessibility improvements. So
if people have ideas on the Kittle Park, let us know, because we've been kind of struggling with that, absent getting a professional and really to help design it. And what are we trying to do with that one? It's not an easy one on the landscaping side.
You know what would be kind of nice is we had a, what would you call that, Julie? the thing next to the post office that that council member just took down one day, would you call it a labyrinth?
It was like a maze, yeah.
Yeah, like a labyrinth. That would be such a cool thing to have there. I mean, it might just be kind of fun for kids, but you could have boxwood labyrinth of some kind.
That's the strip of grass along in front of the post office.
That used to be a labyrinth.
Oh,
That's what I would call it. I mean, it was really kind of fun to run through as a kid, you know, and it was really well liked. And when then I think it was John Gray took it down one day, just decided, told Public Works to head over there and take it out. And, got a lot of flack for it because people were really upset that it was taken out.
We will get, obviously, the ADA given to get into that parcel, you have to get down.
Yeah.
That's one of those challenges there. And obviously, you're on two busy streets. You're in Sir Francis Drake and Lagunitas, so it's, yeah. So, okay, but that's the reason that one's kind of stalled. Obviously, the Ross Common, our priorities have been getting this facilities here, and Ross Common has been the higher priorities on kind of these, and it was Natalie Coffin Green before than the Kittle, but part of it is just getting going. So if you guys want us to hire a professional as part of that, we will look to do that. But it's been kind of, I would say, back burner to higher priorities for now. And I think we've tried to informally working with RPOA to get a design, and it's not an easy thing to design or figure out. So if council wants us to pursue and put some real money into get a design and a professional out there, we will do that. So
What kind of money are you talking, Joe?
I don't know, whatever it takes to have a professional help get ideas and thoughts. And obviously, you're going to have different thoughts from community members of how it should look, you know, so you're going to have,
You know, RPOA, I thought had Janelle Hobart come and
They did.
and volunteer time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which has been,
I don't know that I really feel like I don't have a great memory of what that was, but
we can try and re-resurrect it, and it's also what to maintain and look and. Yeah.
There's a major issue about that relates to maintenance.
Yeah,
If you're going to make it grass, then you got to maintain it. If you're going to make it some kind of wild planting, then you don't have as much of a maintenance expense. Janelle Hobart's design included grass, and it
Well, it was
kind of
also-
died because of the problem with maintaining it.
in part, some grass is actually easier. Actually, our public works would say it's easier to mow grass than have the non-grass with a lot of cuttings, the weekly maintenance.
Just not
But
good
the
for water.
But the natural grass, if you like it long, then it becomes a weed. When it dry, if there's no water, it becomes really a dry weed in the summer.
Takes up an awful lot of water, though. You know, right now, Kittle Park is sort of a natural, you know, native plants, and it's sort of got a wild feel. And my personal opinion is if it was kept mostly that, maybe, you know, cleaned up a little bit, it could be an attractive area with essentially no maintenance, which I think would be ideal for the town. I don't see a lot of people using it because, as was mentioned, it's right on the corner of Lagunitas and Sir Francis Drake. So it's not terribly safe. You're not going to have little kids going there. But if it just looks nice, I think that's good enough for the town. I hate to spend money on water and landscaping and gardening.
Okay. Well, so I hear, and we'll think more about whether we should put something in the budget, if this is worth the budget or not.
You know, Marin Master Gardeners is having this big push to plant natives and save the monarch butterflies, as you and I have talked about before. So maybe they would have an interest in volunteering their time to help design something that is low maintenance, native plants, fire smart, low water, all that kind of stuff. Let me talk to them and see if they, although, you know, a charity project for Ross might not resonate. I don't know. But I'll talk to them.
Any other capital thoughts?
Is there a slide, a further slide on this about like the undergrounding of utilities?
That's going to be in the project list we're going to mention.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So shall we move on? And you let me know how much part of this was still part of the facilities, was obviously the challenges that we know is the money. You're aware of the three options, the cost, and looking for the decision in the March meeting, or at least shortly after March, if not the March meeting, on what facilities we should be rebuilding. So the funding availability, as I mentioned in the 5-year CIP, we have in $550,000 a year in each of the 5 years to transfer in, is what we're showing. I've just placed as a minimum of 500. Obviously, if in a budget year we need it, but my target is at least 500,000. Currently, we have $4.2 million in the facilities fund. That's before this year's fiscal year's transfer. What I'm recommending is, because we have an operating fund balance that is sufficiently safe to do so, and I was always planning this as part of what I said, that target 7 million, is to increase this year's transfer from 550,000 to $2 million. So by the end of this fiscal year, we'd be in about $6 million in the facilities fund. I bring a budget adjustment to you in the coming months, because it will be for this fiscal year, to increase the transfer from 550,000 to 2 million. Obviously, as we get closer to the project, I want to get the money in there. And next year, if you notice in the CIP, one of the big things is the start of the master plan and CEQA. So we were even putting half $500,000 as part of the project in next year's budget, just because obviously we got to start all the studies, the master plan itself, the CEQA. So anyhow, unless there's some other thoughts, otherwise, I was looking to bring an item to increase this year's transfer to $2 million. Does that make sense? And the reason we could do it, our operating fund will still have over 40% fund balance as a percentage of operating fund expenses. A prudent target is 20 to 25%, and we're significantly over that. In essence, at some point, we'll probably even be transferring more than the 500s there. So if that makes sense, you will see in the coming months budget adjustment in this year's budget to increase that transfer from 550,000 to 2 million. And that hence will be at 6 million. And obviously with the coming years, we'll be at around the 7 million mark when we start construction. But the project costs are really starting now. Obviously, once we hire the consultants, obviously the bills are starting, not the construction, but there's obviously a lot of studies and design needed to get there. And then obviously we're looking at all facilities, and relate to the big facilities. Obviously, we know the ballot measures going to be needed, and wherever we can on items, we look for grants, and if we could get donations or anything else. So is there any question related to funding the capital facilities, and including the buildings or any other capital facilities? Okay. If That makes sense. We're going to move on to the next item. And remember, I can't see all of you. So if you have questions, I can see some of you, not all of you in the share screen. So make sure you please speak up.
Wait, wait, you want to ask for any public comment on these
Yes.
CIP
Okay.
things?
Linda, if you could
Yeah,
see.
there is no one with a raised hand.
Thank you.
Okay, so next, moving, the elements left we want to talk about is the town goals, if council's desiring any modifications to it. And then we're going to talk on what projects we've initially had in the budget. And we started talking about some of them, obviously in capital, and some kind of bled over from the capitals there. 5 years ago at our strategic workshop, council members developed our town goals, the 6 goals. We've had a couple of modifications, most recently 2 years ago, still the same essence of the same 6. For staff and the public, I think the town goals are very helpful in guiding us. I look at these goals on a regular basis to see what projects and what we're doing meeting the town goals, and kind of looking, and particularly at each budget, are we addressing each of these in any way, the ones that could have projects or something going related to them. And overall, goals should be lasting. You know, they should be test of time, but obviously they should be updated and refined as needed. So I guess I'm putting it out to the town council members. Do you have any changes or refinements or proposals relate to our current goals?
I do. I think on number 6, I would like to have the word fairness included in number 6. And the reason for this stems from the Black Lives Matter event that some of us participated in June, as well as the remarks that I made and seem to be endorsed based on the Sir Francis Drake name change. So I would add that for number 6. And then I would also add something about climate change. I think that is an overarching, looming crisis that we and subsequent councils are going to be dealing with probably forever. And so I would think of something like pursue environmental sustainability, something like that, because I feel like with these 6 goals, everything that we do going forward should also have a climate impact consideration. And so I'd like to see a concrete goal about that. So those are my 2 suggestions.
Okay.
I like those as well. And I think that, you know, we should make sure that policy is carried out, meaning, you know, there's, you know, Belvedere, for example, their staff is driving around in smart cars. That's what they're cruising around. And when you think of Ross, there's no reason why we need big gas guzzlers. It should be green, and they could even be smart cars, because you're really not taking on any dangerous streets. But anyway, so yeah, I would agree.
I also agree. I think, I mean, if number 6 is changed to read, provide transparency, consistency, and fairness in government, I think that's a really, we all, I mean, who's not in favor of fairness for everyone, regardless of what the situation is? And then your wording, Julie, pursue environmental sustainability. I think that's a good goal also. And I agree, Elizabeth, that, you know, starting with town vehicles, I mean, you know, eventually, I mean, to sort of phase out the old ones and bring in new ones, but, you know, those are concrete ways we could implement that goal as a town, and then of course encourage residents. So Julie, I support both of those, as does, I agree.
Any other comments? Council members Cool or Kircher on the proposal to add fairness? Cool.
I have some misgivings about the suggestion of adding a specific goal as a separate specific goal, something about climate change. Wherever you stand, I mean, obviously we all are concerned about our climate and what's going on with it. But that is still a somewhat not a proposition that everybody agrees with. And I think we should, for that reason, in other words, I don't want to see us put in a goal that may produce unfavorable reaction from a significant number of people. I have no problem with our, in fact, considering climate change. We should obviously consider climate change in everything we're doing, but I think there is a sufficient element of people who do not buy into the whole process, that it's just waving a red flag to make it a town goal.
Hey, Beach, is there a way to reword it so that it's not quite such a, so that that political component disappears? What do you think?
I don't know.
I
haven't thought of one offhand.
Mayor, your microphone.
Yeah, I think we're doing this not to do the politically correct thing. I think we need to do this as a town goal, and whether people agree or disagree with our goals, we need to be doing this as fiduciaries of the town. So I hear you. I hear that there's, people who may balk about us having a town goal of pursuing environmental sustainability, but in our heart of hearts, I think that's what we, as fiduciaries of the town, that's what we should be doing.
I agree.
Sustainability is broader than climate change. Beach, do you think if we word this as simply referring to sustainability, some people will connect that to climate?
I think that would be an improvement, but I guess I'd like to see this. I think this is something that we've got to be very careful about the wording of.
The language I proposed is pursue environmental sustainability. We can work on trying to make it more benign, but get the message across. Originally, I had much more strident and aggressive language. Joe talked me off the ledge in having language like that. Thank you, Joe. So we've already worked to try to make it fairly neutral, but encompassing, what we really need to do and what our thoughts are about it.
Well,
Another town, Novato, actually, Joe found this, instead of sustainability, they use the word stewardship. So they have pursue environmental stewardship. Beach, maybe that's more palatable to you.
Well, either one's pretty palatable. I just have some, well, maybe I don't. I don't know what I think. That sort of wording is not a big problem for me, but I still have some doubts about the idea of making it a town goal.
I want to just say that I think it really should be a town goal. And I don't even think sustainability is where we're at, because frankly, if we don't turn back the clock, we're in trouble. So it's not even sustainability. We need to take aggressive action or we're out of luck. And I think this is controversial to probably less than 10% of residents of Ross. Because I just don't, I mean, even my friends who are Republicans, they just truly don't have any controversy around this. And so, you know, hearing staff say this is important for us to understand where you're coming in as a goal, because then we'll head there policy wise. I think we really do need to give them that direction. I mean, it doesn't mean that the way that they carry that out isn't up for our review. If they propose ordinances that we think aren't appropriate, it doesn't mean we're just like, oh my God, we've got this policy, but hopefully it does guide them in terms of things like purchasing or, you know, considering environmental issues when they are proposing regulations.
No, I might be more in favor, Julie, of the one you said Novato has, pursue environmental stewardship. It has less of a political ring to it. You certainly don't want to have a goal that residents are going to think, uh-oh, now just like, you know, Berkeley, that Ross is going to outlaw gas lines to new houses or something. I mean, I don't think that our residents are there yet, but environmental stewardship, it's pretty hard to disagree with that. I mean, we want to be stewards of the environment, and that does encompass pretty much everything. I mean, I agree with Beach. You don't want a policy that then makes it like that we have to say, okay, no gas hookups for new houses. You know, you don't want it to look like we're going there unless we really intend to be going there. And I don't think that we are, but I would be fine with pursue environmental stewardship. I think that's a very good goal. And I think that it's hard to have much of a concern about it.
Well, and based on what Elizabeth Breckus said, maybe stewardship is even broader because it's not sustainability staying in one place. I agree that we need to do a lot more based on, you know, how much carbon and greenhouse gas is in the atmosphere, but stewardship is fine with me.
Good. I mean, pursue is a little bit vague, like it's almost like a directive. I'm not sure if there's a better word than pursue, but I do like environmental stewardship.
Promote.
Promote. I like that.
That's good.
I think that's great. Because that way it's, yeah, I like that.
And since I suggested the word, I guess I got to back off and say I'm okay with it.
Yes.
You really warmed to the idea, Beach.
Well, so we have agreement on promote environmental stewardship, it sounds like.
So all 5 council members, does that sound good?
Yeah, and you know, on the fairness one, I don't know if you all saw, but there's a government tort claim for that incident in Tiburon against the city for $2 million, and now they've added Belvedere. So
why have they added Belvedere to the claim?
Belvedere police came and did backup.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know, you know, I don't think we have huge issues like that, but I certainly think that, and I'm sure I'm not at all suggesting we micromanage how our police trains the officers, but you can see how that can be an incredibly expensive
Tell them
situation.
never to go out of town.
What's that?
Tell them never to go out of town.
Okay, so it sounds like we're set. Is the fairness going after consistency, provide transparency, comma, consistency and fairness in government? Is that the way it will go?
Yeah, that sounds fine with me.
And then promote environmental stewardship.
We should talk about where in the order the promote environmental stewardship should go.
Obviously, staff has to put it on the list. So what number? We'll now have 7. So where, with a new goal, where does it fall on this list that we have up.
Well, is the order of these goals, does it have some significance?
To only some, well, it's not to be rank order. We did.
Because I think if that's the case, we got to move sustained financial responsibility and stability down.
Oh, that was the one that was very much years ago, originally, very decidedly council said to put at the top position, and seeing it, the value to our residents and staff. To be honest, if you're not financial responsible and stability, you don't get a lot of other things done. Because without money and showing the community you're good stewards of the resources, I think it shows a lot of support. I remember originally I debated some with the council 5 years ago, and there was good reasons they said to put it up the first. So
Yeah, my view is that I think current number six, provide transparency, consistency, and fairness in government. I think that should be the first one. That's like the overarching, goal. And then everything else to me falls below that.
Okay, this is obviously up to council. I guess I kind of see the programs and that provide consistent transparency, but even that this isn't a rank order. So let's not make this a rank order, but I think people want to,
We are making it a ranked order.
Well, I guess now we are, so.
Yeah, and we did 5 years ago if we debated putting that one first.
Yeah, I don't know if we debated much else. I think everybody was the second overall saying deliver effective, efficient services. I don't know if the 3 through 5 was seen as really a rank order per se. And 6, people thought it was underlying everything, underlying a lot. So that felt, but obviously it's up to council's decision, how you want it. I think the order has worked. Well, I don't think there's an order, but anyhow, it's how you read it.
I mean, I would probably just put our new one at the bottom, but I'm not really thinking, I don't feel too strongly. I do like financial responsibility at the top. I mean, we ask our people to pay for parcel taxes. So I think it's sort of nice that we say, we're trying to run this town well. I kind of agree, Julie, transparency and consistency and fairness. That is a big one. I wouldn't mind if we kept 1, transparency goes to 2, and the environment goes to 7. That's my suggestion.
Those rich people in Ross put money first.
I think the reason sustained financial responsibility and stability is because things were very different 5 years ago.
Yeah.
People were coming out of a different environment. The town had been run differently. It's kind of a reflection, Joe, on you and the council that financial responsibility and stability that's not an issue anymore. It used to be an issue, but it's not an issue anymore. It's a goal. Yes, we shouldn't take it off. I'm not suggesting that, but it doesn't have the urgency that it did.
So then what if we put number 6 as number 1, the new one is number 7, and everything else stays the same?
I'm willing to go however you want.
I'd go with the suggested of 6 as number 1.
And then Beach, the new one is new one, number 7, environments at the bottom. Okay. We can always tweak it later. Well, no, once we publish it, we'll leave it, but I'm okay with that.
Is council good with that? So 6 becomes 1, everything else slides down, and the new 7 is promote environmental stewardship. Do I have any council members not agreeing to that? Now's the time to speak. Otherwise, that is how it's going to come out. Okay.
It would be great if this could be somewhere on the website too. So
Absolutely.
that people can refer to it.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, council members. Anything else on town goals before we move to the next item?
Do we need to take public comment?
Oh, yes. Public comments, Linda?
There are no raised hands.
Okay, with that, we will move. And this is really, I think, this is for the most part, the last section of the workshop. It's items we've put in, obviously we're still in the budget doing the things, the ongoing things. Police is still doing police. We're still doing all the planning applications, the building inspections. This is more, a lot relate to what are we trying to do new or one-time things. Some of these do have a capital component, like Rich has already mentioned, we're doing the storm drainage master plan, but this is the document part of it, but that does come out of capital funds, for example, to pay for it. But these are items we are looking to do, but want to need council's input. And so I'll just start going down them and turn it over to staff for some of them as we get there. Obviously, we're continuing whatever COVID procedures we need to do in town, and it's going to be evolving. It's hopefully getting lesser, but it's still evolving. We did a lot in the last year related to that second bullet, which has a host, and definitely the Marin Wild Prevention Authority, MWPA, has helped greatly doing defensible space inspections and vegetation management. We are in the process in the next several months of getting the evacuation route map out. And when we say enhancements, there's also going to be, it's part is like when we did the vegetation clearing, it's vegetation clearing along routes so people can exit. There's a focus on helping people in this year's MWPA funds. We have our local money, which we've used for defensible space evaluations and vegetation removal on some roads. Then there's the core money, the 60% that's supposed to be broader. And it seems like the proposal this year is much of that is also going to go into the local communities to help with their evacuation routes. So that's definitely seen as a high priority by MWPA. Also on the bigger outside projects, like say and above, like the ridges and the Marin MMWD land that surrounds like us and San Anselmo and Fairfax. There's a lot of environmental work that needs to be done before some projects could really get done. So while that's happening, we're going to get more money locally to get things going in town. Then we have, obviously, we've talked a lot about in the past with the facility selection to town facilities master plan, which we will be starting after hiring the consultant after the council selects which facilities. The Ross Common Landscape Improvement Master Plan, which should be starting in the next month or two. Rich mentioned the Storm Drainage Master Plan. We obviously have the flood control project, the potential redesign of Allen Park. And we have 2 undergrounding districts and are meeting with the consultants, the West Ross district, which is the Fern Hill, Lagunitas, and the bigger one with 107 parcels. And then we have been working with PG&E on undergrounding the utilities around our town hall parcel, which we need for our facilities plan to change access. Just so you know, PG&E has been very hard to get into meetings with and to evaluate, saying our first priority is wildfire prevention. And so it's been hard to get undergrounding. I think Rich and I have had several conversations with our contact in the last 2 months. I think we're about to break through, hopefully, and gain somebody to evaluate it more. But obviously, we're going to continue to pursue, and they know that's an important priority. But it is, and it'll be interesting how important PG&E becomes for like the West Ross or any of these. Because to get PG&E, obviously they're PG&E lines, a lot of what's being undergrounded, and it's not easy to get them to come evaluate and give their analysis. So if there's any question on this, and then I'm going to turn it over to the next page. And obviously we'll come back to any of these, but Julie.
Yeah, is the county flood protection plan project and potential redesign of Allen Park, does that have a budget implication for the town of Ross?
Just staff time and legal counsel time. Obviously, any of it's out of our operating fund.
Okay.
But to date, and that should keep that way, there's nothing, I would think, improvement wise that will be coming from us.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Breckus?
Yeah, as part of the undergrounding utility district in the town hall area, does that at all, or when you meet with PG&E, if you could ask, is there any potential savings to either Sir Francis Drake or like Lagunitas, where it goes across the school, to if those streets wanted to consider undergrounding at the same time, or maybe even Sylvan, I don't know. Is there any savings that might be realized by piggybacking on when the town does its undergrounding?
Gonna see if Rich has a response to that, and I'll.
Yeah. So it depends on the size of the other district, the Rule 20B district that we'd be joining with. Of course, you do get some savings with the size of the district as far as assessments. It's a little tricky mixing Rule 20B assessment district funds with Rule 20A credits that we receive from PG&E. So there.
I'm
I
not
know it's
suggesting that. I was kind of suggesting areas that have, 20B is kind of far away, I would think. But I was wondering if Sir Francis Drake, which is, for example, hasn't gone through this process, but if you could say, hey, it's never going to be cheaper or something. Is that true, or does that not? Is there no savings by piggybacking on when the town does it?
We'd have to look into that more. In face value, it sounds like there would be savings in spreading the project out beyond the town hall area down Sir Francis Drake. It's a matter of you're still mixing Rule 28 credits with possible private money. And then you have the general benefit and the special benefits you have to take a look at. So
it would add quite a bit of complexity, because it wouldn't be 20As we don't even have enough 20A just to do around the town hall.
Mm-hmm.
So you need 20B, and so you're kind of mixing an assessment with a work credit. And I believe, isn't PG&E's the lead on a 20A, and 20B's more others that are the lead. So that's why we need PG&E to do the 20A project. Rich, am I correct? Isn't it PG&E that does the 20As?
yeah, and we're the lead on the 20B, really. So
Yeah, so it's a whole different structure. Now we are looking possibly, but it's only if it doesn't complicate and we can get it done. We were looking up Lagunitas, because right now it goes to about Sylvan Lane. If we could get by the school and the church with the 28 up Lagunitas, but we need PG&E to come out and have the conversations with them and get the cost estimates and get their thoughts, even going to that part.
Mm-hmm.
right.
Well, I thought you had talked to us at some point about purchasing credits that were going to expire from other jurisdictions. And I just wonder, heck, you talk about 2.9 for the Winship Bridge, which is just fine as far as I can tell. and, purchasing credits to underground our community, which if you haven't talked to Belvedere or Tiburon residents that have done that, they love it. They're overjoyed. They think it's the greatest thing, except for a few people who don't. And, it would just be tremendous, profound change in our town for generations to look into that. So I don't know. I just would really like to at least understand the ramifications of that.
And CPUC is changing the work credits. They don't like the people purchasing work credits and have been, they're putting, the PUC is complicating this too, where people used to buy from each other. PG&E saying, oh, they may not allow that in the future. And so there's this
Let's get
regulation at the PUC. Well, yeah, but we got to be able to use them, and you need a cost estimate. But we are definitely want to buy work credits. So part of it is how will that process go? And it's the PUC's actively changing the market. It has been since a year ago, but it isn't really settled how they're handling these buying work credits. But we're definitely going to look to buy them unless PUC says that's not allowed anymore. The PUC wants to control them all instead of letting individual jurisdictions control them and sell them.
Right.
We're getting a whole new level of government oversight in effect over this.
Well, is it, given that, should we be looking at this now before they change?
Oh, we are.
We are. Yeah.
We are. That's why we're trying to get, but we can't move until PG&E gets on the ground here. We're trying to desperately get PG&E staff on the ground looking at our situation.
Yeah, then we need a good cost estimate to know, to budget when we go to reach out to those agencies that are offering their credits to sell. We need to know how much we need to buy. We don't want to buy too much or enough. We'll never have an exact number until we, go through to construction. But staff feels that PG needs to provide us with a higher level of confidence in the cost before we go down that route. And that's what Joe and I are currently. Just as soon as last week, we were talking with the PG&E Rule 20A rep on how to move forward as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So
and then back to the undergrounding of Sir Francis Drake. So that you start looking at it being more of a general benefit than a special benefit that could be part of an assessment district. And so that's capital that would have to come out of the town for a general benefit, or from people offering to help pay for that. So you can't put general benefit into an assessment district and amortize it over 30 years like they're doing in West Ross. When you've got something like Sir Francis Drake, it's probably going to be that you're going to need to come up with the cash right off the bat.
You mean for residents to connect their electricity to the main? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about that and the main infrastructure of undergrounding along Sir Francis Drake. It's
going to get a big, with the assessment district law, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
On how to.
Very expensive too.
Special benefit versus general benefit.
But
how leave a lot of general benefit, and then it's who pays for all the general benefit.
Yeah. How come you could do it down to Lagunitas?
Oh, well, I'm just seeing if that isn't going to be that much more expensive. And well, in part is we want to see. And so obviously the work credits, and there is really, I think there's only one house on it. It is the town property, Kittle Park, the common, the school, the church, and I think there's one or two houses.
Yeah, as long as it's fronting along the school or the town hall,
yeah,
it's
and
considered a Rule
sure.
20A. Yeah.
For now, we're just getting a Sylvan Lane, I think it is. So that's only if PG&E thinks that's doable and we can make that. In effect, we're going to try to see if they'll say that's an option that could work here or not.
Mm-hmm. They may allow a Rule 20A all the way down through Francis Drake, but
Well, they could, but then the question is, how do we pay for it?
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, if you don't have the assessments to pay for it, who's paying for it? Would be the town, unless people are donating a lot of money.
I mean, it just might be something that would be nice for when you do bring something back. It might be nice for you to explain that better to us, because obviously if there's some way we can purchase it and, go around the commons, which is actually, the school's not even our property, it's the commons that are our property. So I
Yeah,
would
well,
rather
it's
go
both.
left at Lagunitas than benefit the church and the school if they don't want to pitch in. Or, if we could really get the money cheap, what about going down Shady Lane? It's a
No, we're not gonna get that.
why you can't. I'm just saying, if you're going to bring something back to us, could you educate us a little better on this idea that sounded great when you told us about it, of buying up these credits and maybe doing some more undergrounding?
And obviously, we're gonna have to find out more from the PUC too, and that is actively changing as we speak. If we answered this question 2 years ago, it's much, much different than today, given the PUC's involvement.
Mhm.
And what PG&E is saying, what they think PUC's intent is. So, okay, but when we do come back with it, obviously our goal is to get it moving because we need it for our town hall projects to get it moving too. So. Then I'll turn it over to others. Gretchen, if you want to go over the first items here, and then Patrick, I'll take some of the others.
Yeah, hi guys. So of course, before COVID came along, we had lots of big and exciting ideas for community building events, and that has clearly been put on hold. We are hoping that there's a light at the end of the tunnel here, and that we'll be able to, start doing more of these things. We did the outdoor dining event recently, and as kind of like a pilot program, and it went really well. And so we're kind of hoping to be able to do that on a more monthly basis now that the weather's gotten nice again. And the restaurants were really thankful, and it went really well. It was a good turnout. And one thing, I'm not sure if this should have been mentioned with the CIP, but we're looking into purchasing tables and chairs rather than renting. And I think that in the long run, we save a lot of money by doing that, and we have room to store them, so we can use them for other things like town dinner, things like that. But we're also looking into bringing movie nights back, which we did a while ago. And then we've also been working a lot with Ross Auxiliary. They have a lot of really fun ideas, and it wouldn't be a big financial burden for us at all. It's more of just kind of partnering in marketing, bringing the community together, brainstorming ideas, figuring out possibly if there could be staff that is needed for like public work, setting things up, things like that. But otherwise, there's no huge financial burden in any of this. It's really more of just a way of celebrating this beautiful place that we have to live in, and trying to bring people together in a very, very safe way. And we right now, of course, want to be role models in following CDC guidelines. So we don't want to do anything that's going to make us look to the town like we're being irresponsible. So right now, that's our main priority in doing any of these things. And so some of the ideas with Ross Auxiliary is a turkey trot, the Winter Fest, kind of doing more than they did this year, winter dining, spring fling, so doing little things for Valentine's Day, things like that. Nothing huge, but just a way to kind of celebrate the community and do fun things for all ages. And then the age-friendly Ross strategic plan. So that also got put on hold, obviously, because now is not a great time to bring, an age-friendly type group together. But Terry Dowling, who's wonderful, she's been swamped with working with the San Francisco Human Health. But what we were working on before this was kind of getting a committee of volunteers in Ross that wanted to participate in the age-friendly strategic planning. Sue Talmadge, who of course used to work here, is one of the people. So we're working on trying to get a Zoom set up with those people to brainstorm next steps, what's most important, look back on the data that they collected before, and find ways to move forward with that and support that population in a way that we most beneficial to them. So right now things are a bit on hold, but I think the partnerships that the town and Ross Rec have built with both Ross Auxiliary and then Terry Dowling is putting us in a really good position for when there is more, I guess, normalcy, that we'll be able to kind of jump into these things in a safe and fun way. So there's a lot of exciting stuff coming, and I'm looking forward to be able to do that with the town and, you know, other partnerships. And I guess from the council, what would be great is if you had any thoughts on the ideas that we have currently or new thoughts. I'm always open to new thoughts on different events or community building events, and always here to discuss those and brainstorm and kind of spitball those things. So I just want to put that out there. And if you had any thoughts specifically on events that we would or would not do, I guess. And then, sorry, one more thing. We usually have the 4th of July and then the town dinner. So of course, those are all going to be dependent on what's happening with COVID, and we'll just follow the guidelines there and to keep everybody safe. So it's kind of hard to believe that 4th of July will be traditional, but we might be able to get creative and do something, you know, a little out of the box that we haven't done before. So that's that. Oh, you're muted.
So council, any items for Gretchen or comments or other thoughts?
Thank you, Gretchen, for doing all this in this really odd, challenging time. We all really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I would say of all the departments, recreation's been the most challenging to try to go through, and every time every guideline changes and how recreation. So to be able to offer programs both online and in person, and all the things they have to do to relate to those classes has really been extraordinary efforts. And obviously people are still utilizing, but it's much, much less because that's all you can have nowadays.
Right. Yeah.
So moving. Oh.
Oh, go ahead. I just was going to say with recreation, we're hopeful that as we move towards the fall, things will be able to get a little bit closer to normal. We'll be able to, you know, increase revenues and all of those things. But just like the events, we're just going to follow the guidelines out there and our focus on safety and fun all at the same time.
Okay, we'll move on. Oh. Councilmember Breckles.
Yeah, can I just say one other thing, which is, you know, we used to have Gretchen, we used to have this, you know, a committee of residents, and there was even a council position on it to kind of give input. I think it's great that you got the Age Action council or committee that is giving you input on that stuff. I think that's really helpful. I wonder what kind of, you know, is there any other way that you are getting input from residents on classes that they want? You know, I did also want to share really sad news. I think we've had 3 7th graders in the county commit suicide in the last couple weeks, which just breaks my heart as a mother of a 7th grader, not in Ross, but in the community. And you know, the kids are not all thriving. I mean, I feel like mine are doing really reasonably well, but they're not all thriving. And I just wonder, is there, you know, you guys in rec serve such an important role in providing activity and I think mental health, but I just wonder, you know, are we getting enough input from the families in our community, or could we do a little bit more There used to be that leadership cabinet, and I don't know how active that is continuing to be. But, I just would love to see, you get the feedback, because I think it was always really helpful. When I was sat in on those meetings, Julie, you were a member at one point in time. It was like, rec is a little bit of throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks, right? So, but it was always nice because it seemed like some good ideas for programs and classes came up from that.
I would say, so I've been working with Dr. McDowell, the superintendent of the school, a little bit to see what their needs are. He's, been talking more about academically speaking, where kids have struggled a little bit more with this distance learning, and we're going to try to address that with some academic summer camp programs. But it's been really hard as far as staffing, because that's really our main limitation right now, because staff is only allowed to work with one cohort at a time, any session, and then it has to be less than 14 or less kids. So we have, for some programs, we have these huge wait lists, but we have no way of getting them into the program because we just don't have the staffing. And so but I mean, I understand, because they obviously don't want, all these different instructors working with different groups of kids, but that has been one of the biggest challenges through all of this, is just wanting to be able to serve more and not being able to. So, and I mean, if anybody ever sends ideas, or, I always love to hear about it and work with different members of the community and try to get it to work out if it seems like it's something feasible. So we're always open to new ideas. It's a matter of whether people know that they can do that. Maybe Elizabeth, they know they can reach out to me or the town with ideas. And if there's not like a committee, like you say, if they know that's an open channel or not, I guess. I'm wondering if maybe trying to connect, like as you were saying this, I was thinking with the PTA or something of the school, and kind of see if, because they're the ones with the kids every day, they're children, and seeing if they get a sense of needs that maybe that they're noticing that we can help address. So that might be a new kind of channel I can try to reach out to and get a sense from them as well, because it's not all about academic. Obviously, there's so many. I know I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and my 5-year-old's doing virtual kindergarten. It's been rough, and she's only 5, and there's kids. I know I just got the alert on my phone about that 7th grader. It's
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great idea to try and reach. And I guess I wonder, I mean, I get that, like, John Mark can probably, or Sandra can only be with, so many, but there's such a high unemployment, and there's all these gym people and trainers that are out there that are not working. Is it not possible to recruit and be able to offer, tennis? I mean, the kids are not even in their regular school program. So
right.
My daughter's out at 11:30, and, frankly, I mean, her doing jumping jacks in her room, it's like, it's not even happening. I would just prefer for her to not to PE and go over to the tennis courts and play or something.
Right. And
I was
so
wondering,
I know again, it's staffing, because the tennis coaches that we usually use, they're doing classes with children in other locations. So we can't technically have them come to a class with us for youth, because then they're
reach out to a different tennis coach.
Yeah, it's really the one cohort thing is what's making things so difficult for us, because they're all working other places.
Mm-hmm.
So but I am having a meeting tomorrow with Maya and Janine, who work here, and we're going to talk about mostly summer planning, but also staffing, and what if we need to put ads out and try to recruit more, because with these small cohorts, it's really, really challenging to serve as many in the community as we want to and that need it. So I totally hear what you're saying, and we are taking steps to kind of look at how we can expand that now. And I'm hoping with the numbers going down with COVID, that they will at some point change that guideline so that it's not so restrictive. Because like teachers in school, they can work with more than one cohort. Kids can be in more than one cohort, but they haven't budged on this recreation youth sport thing. So
And
hoping that changes.
do you meet with Larkspur Rec and San Anselmo Rec to try and figure out, hey, do we have the same problems? Can we?
Yeah, so
Area
I do a Zoom every couple weeks with rec people actually all over the state, and a lot of people are having the exact same frustration there. And then also with I do Zooms with the county and the rec people, and staffing has been a huge issue for a lot of people.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we'll we'll move into some of the planning issues. Patrick Streeter, Planning and Building Director. So the first thing I wanted to bring up with the council is our climate action plan. As you're likely aware, we have a climate action plan. It was adopted in 2010, and it does provide guidance and goal setting as far as our approach to addressing climate change. So it is now it looks like we're going to have some kind of sustainability factoring into our council goals, but it's also part of the town's goals is addressing climate change through the climate action plan. It roughly lines up with the state's targets, which were set to reduce greenhouse gases back to based on the base greenhouse gases of 1990. So reaching a 20% reduction by 2020, a 40% reduction by 2030, and an 80% reduction by 2050. That's below those 1990 levels. And so our climate action plan, the strategies haven't changed very much, and it's kind of worth pointing out that I just went through it, and our land use and transportation chapter does have a strategy that says increase ownership of plug-in vehicles by providing EV charging station infrastructure where appropriate. So we are actually considering that in our strategies already. And so while the strategies haven't changed too much in the 11 years since this has been adopted, the targets are obviously changing. We've, if you recall back from our presentation in November, the town has actually exceeded its 2020 targets of a 20% reduction, and that's below our 2005 greenhouse gas levels. And so we may want to consider updating the climate action plan to address, to create a target for 2030. It's silent on anything beyond 2020, so it's a little stale at this point. So that's something that the council can consider. Just for reference, in Marin County, San Rafael, San Anselmo, Novato, and Corte Madera, as well as the County of Marin, have all updated their climate action plans with 2030 targets. And Fairfax, Larkspur, and Tiburon are in process. So we would not be alone in taking this approach. So that's something for the council to consider. Again, it would probably not be a brand new climate action plan. It would probably just be updating it to bring it up to date. Other planning initiatives that we are considering are the general plan. General plan is good through 2025. You're not required to update your general plan once the planning window has closed, but it's generally a good idea to have a general plan that looks beyond the current date. So we will be taking on that initiative in the coming years. But in the meantime, the regional housing needs allocation numbers are in process. That's the number of units that each jurisdiction is supposed to plan to provide in order to address the housing needs in California. This latest round is going to be pretty high for a lot of jurisdictions, including Ross. Right now, the number that we're looking at is upwards of 100 new units that we'd be responsible for showing where we're going to put those. We're going to have to address that by January 1st, 2023. So the way we address that is by updating our housing element. So we are going to be doing an update to the housing element of the general plan. Whether or not we do a full update of the general plan and include the housing element, or we do the housing element followed by the general plan update, is something that we'll be looking for guidance from the council on how to approach that. We do have, we've been applying for grants and funding through the LEAP grant. Also, we have funding coming in through there's another grant through MTC called REAP that we've just received. We've submitted our application for. So there is outside funding that's helping to at least start this housing element update. But that is something that we'll be taking on soon, and whether or not that's tied into the general plan is a question for the council. Objective design standards are basically what they say. They're standards as opposed to subjective guidelines for design. They're again addressing the housing issue. The state is coming up with a lot of legislation that removes local control as far as deciding whether or not to approve a project. And they basically say that the design has to be objective. You have to have a standard written in your code that says how something should be designed. So Ross has been partnered with the other Marin jurisdictions and the county to actually come up with an objective design standard toolkit. This was done through SB2 funds. And so we do have this toolkit that we can borrow from. It's a pretty substantial amount of work to parse out the applicable sections of that toolkit that would count towards Ross, but we can incorporate that into our zoning code so that we're better prepared for having projects that are acceptable to the community if we have no local control over how they look. And then also talking about downtown visioning, this is something that's been in previous workshops with the council. It's really about the types of land use that we and the feel of the downtown in Ross. So it could include goals or incentives or updating the zoning code. Right now, the zoning code does favor the types of activity generating uses that we'd want to see in a downtown. So for instance, restaurants and retail are permitted by right. There's no need to go through the planning process. You just you attain what's called a zoning clearance. We say it fits the zoning, and then you get your business license. You can have a business that operates that activates the street. Something that like an architect's office or a law office, something that may not be as activity generating. If that's going to be proposed on the streetscape, that goes through the use permit process where the town does have a say as to whether or not to approve it. And so we really want to see if that's an appropriate fit. So there already are incentives to see that kind of active downtown, but we can go further. We can find ways of incentivizing the types of uses that we'd like to see. We can talk about the visioning for the downtown, as well as any kind of consistency zoning. So for instance, a signage ordinance to make sure that signage is consistent. So those are things that we can consider for the downtown. Moving on, there's the vehicle miles traveled ordinance. So the state, per the California Environmental Quality Act, we are now past the deadline to switch from level of service as a threshold for impacts to vehicle miles traveled. So previously, for traffic impacts for a project, we were looking at level of service. So that's basically the impact to the driver of a project. So how long you're waiting at an intersection, how much traffic there is in a street segment. It is switched now, so it's vehicle miles traveled. So it's the impact to the environment based on the number of drivers that a project will create. So it's a completely different way of looking at project impacts. We have to set our own thresholds and standards of how we determine what is a significant impact. And so that is something that the planning department would be looking at approaching, probably in partnership with the other Ross Valley jurisdictions, because we're all looking at similar traffic patterns and a regional tie to the traffic network. And then the last planning item I wanted to talk about was our planning and building fee schedule. Currently, at least in planning, we have what's a deposit system. So for projects that are proposed, we take in a planning deposit and then we debit from that deposit based on staff time and other costs. It's not been consistently applied of what costs factor into projects. It also creates some uncertainty for an applicant as to how much it's actually going to cost in planning permitting fees. So one way to approach this would be to have flat fees or fees based on potential valuation, which is what we have in the building side. But just something that's a little more clear for applicants to understand what kind of fees are associated with a project, and also easier for staff to manage and stay on top of, and making sure that we are actually having appropriate cost recovery for projects. And that, of course, would require a fee study before we can implement it into the fee schedule. So those are the planning projects that are on the horizon. And so we're kind of looking for council input as to which of these to prioritize, and how much staff time to really put forward to these different types of initiatives.
I take it, Patrick, all of them are planned for next year's budget. So is it more that they're on target, or do you really want a prioritization, or are some of them not able to be done next year?
They're all in the budget. I think it's really a prioritizing of staff time. Do we, for instance, with the climate action plan, do we want to just quickly go in and update our targets and set them for 2030, or do we want to revisit the types of strategies that we're incorporating and the goals and kind of the background and approach to the climate action plan? So it's really a prioritization question.
Council.
Yeah, and if there's no comments from council, then we'll take that to understand that they all have equal priority, and we as staff will kind of apply what we think was going to give the best results.
That sounds good.
Okay.
The other question I had for Patrick is, we're killing ourselves in Ross to have no more permeable surface or impermeable, whichever it is, I can never remember. And then one jurisdiction away, that doesn't even exist. They let that seminary be rebuilt without any extractions whatsoever, and increased a lot of increase. And I just wonder, you're having these great conversations with San Anselmo and Fairfax about these other things. Could you add to the discussion this issue of runoff? Because I do believe, we're smart to address it, because I think it's real. I think it adds to flooding, but it doesn't find expression in their codes. I know that. And, I'm having kind of a bad experience with San Anselmo's Title 24 regulations, which are, going to cause me to get rid of a bunch of components that I wouldn't get rid of, and they'll end up in a landfill. And I don't think are green, and are really expensive, and I think are minimally, they're valuable, but I think they could be achieved other ways. So I'm a little hesitant to tell you that I don't know if that was part of that climate action update. I wasn't sure if that was part of that, but anyway, just a couple of thoughts I had.
Yeah, and we do have active conversation with not just what's detailed here, but the planning directors from all across Marin County meet monthly and kind of talk about these topics. So that certainly stormwater infiltration and how it's addressed on a project by project basis is something that we can add to that conversation.
Thank you.
That seems like a flood control goal and issue too, reducing runoff goes to the whole zone 9, flood zone 9 mitigation.
And our approach to those issues are going to be front and center in they're already in our climate action plan and in the general plan. And as we revisit those guiding documents, that's another opportunity for us to say, this is a major priority for the town, is zero net increase in runoff, for instance. So those documents are really where we set the tone. And so we want to do that in consultation with the community and with surrounding communities.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Patrick? Okay. With that, the last two items, one we talked about was if the fire station's not being built, we'll be renegotiating the Ross Valley Fire Department JPA agreement. And that will modify our cost somewhere in that agreement. And then just the other items, and it's part of, got to work on to the site plan here, probably the master plan. We have 3 current cell tower leases in the town property here at Town Hall, generates $120,000 a year. We have, right now, instead of their long-term agreements, but I've been putting everybody on 1- and 2-year agreements until we rebuild, because the hard part is somehow it's how do you continue these going? And obviously they provide services to the community and help your connections to your mobile carrier while we go through this process to keep the leases. And there's also a 4th vendor that wants to be here, and obviously trying to figure out how to do that before we have that site plan. So obviously the sooner we could get into the master plan process, we're renegotiating or negotiating the case of one, where to put them and how to do it. So those are the list of projects we're looking at, and now's the time if council has any questions or other things they think about or questions that relate to our budget or projects. Now's a great time, because after this we are really, I guess this is where we're at. Kind of is there anything else you see that we should be thinking about or want us to think about?
You want to ask for public comment, Joe?
Yes, this would be a great time. So Linda, do we have any public comment on the town priorities or projects for this year's budget?
We do not.
So the question is, council, is there anything else? Obviously, we've had some very, very good discussion, but are there other items any of you have? Okay, with that, and I want to very much, I guess, thank you council members for giving up the big part of your days and volunteering, and we couldn't even give you, normally we'd have pastries and coffee and tea. We couldn't even give you that. So you get 0 pay and 0 food or drink items, and just love spending your 4 hours your day and all your reading and preparation time here. So I want to greatly, greatly thank you. This is very valuable for us, as obviously hearing from council, and to be able to bring work products and a budget documents forward. So, and if you do have anything, please let me know, or staff, if there's other things you think about. Obviously, you might think of something tomorrow or a week from now. Obviously, just let us know.
So thank you. Thank you to staff too for doing an excellent job and providing us with so much material and information. I think it's been really helpful and constructive. So thank you.
Well, thank you. If any council member has any closing comments or otherwise, are we ready to adjourn?
Yes, at 12:52, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.